Good morning and a warm welcome to all, esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, veterans, industry professionals, journalists, research scholars, and interns. I am Nisha Rebecca Epen, Research Officer at the Chennai Center for China Studies. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this one-day international virtual conference titled Manoeuvring the Mineral Market, China's Rare Earths Monopoly, jointly hosted by the Chennai Center for China Studies, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, the Press Institute of India in Chennai, and the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gandhinagar. From ballistic missiles to cell phones, airplanes, computers, military infrastructure, and data storage systems, rare earth elements have become indispensable to the manufacture and upkeep of some of the most vital technologies of our day and age. Given its value as a critical mineral, control over production, processing, and exporting of rare earth elements has a monumental impact on a country's economy and its leading industries. China's chokehold control on this group of heavy metals and its proven intentions to weaponize this monopoly is a matter of growing concern for countries worldwide. Housing the world's fifth largest reserves of REEs, India has an untapped potential in countering China's heavy metal hegemony. With this in mind, the China Study Forum has organized this one-day international virtual conference with a lineup of illustrious speakers and panelists from around the world in order to provide a 360-degree view for policymakers, industry leaders, think tanks, academia, researchers, and the media. Thank you all for joining us today. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Sashi Nair. Mr. Sashi Nair is the director of the Press Institute of India and the editor of its journals, Vidura, Grassroots, and the RIND Survey. Earlier, he was consulting editor, WAN IFRA, the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers, editor, supplements The Economic Times, chief copy editor, The Times of India, Chennai, and assistant editor, The Hindu Business Line. Mr. Nair was a columnist for the New Indian Express and wrote on heritage, sports, and civic issues for Madras Musings and The Hindu. He has co-authored the corporate biography of L&T ECC and contributed to a few books on the history of Madras and some of its prominent citizens. We are honored to have you with us, sir. I now invite Mr. Sashi Nair to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, sir. Sir, you're muted, sir.
Sorry. Thank you, Nisha. It was a long introduction of mine. On behalf of the Press Institute of India, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, and the Chennai Center for China Studies, and the Rashtriya Raksha University, let me extend to all of you a very warm welcome. I'm particularly delighted to welcome Professor Bhimal Patel, the Vice Chancellor of the Rashtriya Raksha University and member of the National Security Advisory Board of India. And also delighted to welcome Mr. Nabil Mancheri, Secretary General of the Rare Earth Industry Association, headquartered in Brussels. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining, sparing your time to be here. And it's a pleasure having you both at the inaugural of this program. This program, of course, will focus on China's monopoly over rare earth elements and what it means for India and the world. I must mention here that this program marks the 10th year of joint programs that the Press Institute of India, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore, and the Chennai Center for China Studies have been conducting. We started way back in 2011 with programs in Chennai and Bangalore. For those of you who might just like to know a bit of the background, the Institute of Contemporary Studies Bangalore specializes in national security issues, international relations, and creates awareness about threats and challenges to India's national security. Its focus is now centered primarily on cybersecurity as an important subtext of national security. It has extensive network among national and international institutions. The Chennai Center for China Studies carries out in-depth studies of developments relating to China with priority on issues of interest to India, such as geopolitical, economic, and strategic dynamics of India-China relations, the Sino-Indian border issues, prospects of Sino-Indian economic and trade relations, and the future evolution of China's politics and its impact of India in the world. C3S, incidentally, ranks among the top 50 independent global think tanks in the world. Both ICSB and C3S are public policy think tanks, ICSB headed by Mr. Heblika and C3S by Komodo Seshadri Vasan. The Press Institute of India is an independent non-profit organization which was established in 1963 to sustain high and responsible standards of journalism. PII's training workshops for journalists are focused on a range of issues, from writing, reporting, editing, to development journalism, women empowerment, child rights, to mental health, tackling fake news now, and of course, on national security and foreign policy. We have trained many journalists from India and neighboring countries, and we continue to offer fellowships. I must add, for the benefit of those who have not been in our previous programs, that last year, when COVID broke out and we were constrained to have webinars, we ran a series of webinars, September to December, titled Deciphering China. And this was very well attended, and we had a distinguished galaxy or panel of speakers, including people like Mr. Jayadev Ranade, Lieutenant General Rajesh Pant, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, of course, Admiral Sunil Lamba was there, and Ambassador Gautam Bambawale. Today's program is the first in a series of similar programs that we've planned this year. And Dr. Patel, I must say that we are particularly happy that we are doing this in association with the Rashtriya Raksha University, a university of national importance, a model security educational university in India, which is focused on security, strategic and defense education, research and training. We are hopeful that this will also mark the beginning of what may be a long and fruitful association between our institutes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. It is now my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Pratap Heblika. Mr. Pratap Heblika is a Strategic Affairs Analyst and Managing Trustee, Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore. He is a director at MaxGrid Securicor India Private Limited, a Bangalore-based private security consultancy company. Besides this, he is associated with several corporate entities in an advisory capacity on matters related to cybersecurity. He is also a member of the board of directors of the Asian Dialogue Society in Singapore. I now welcome Mr. Pratap Heblika to deliver the introduction to the program. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nisha. Good morning to everybody who's on the screen today, who is here with us to spend the next 3 hours going through a program which I believe is very, very important from many, many perspectives. Firstly, let me thank my friend and colleague Shashi for having laid the framework for the way we go forward, and for Nisha for her very cogent introduction of the subject and the speakers so far. I would like especially to welcome Dr. Patel and my colleagues from overseas who represent the Quad's collective wisdom on such important issues, and not forgetting some of those eminent persons who are here who will speak after me. But the first thing is I would like to start with the question, what is so important about this program and why are we here today? There are two issues that need to be flagged, that China is and will always remain a country of concern for India, And the more we know about China and how it operates and how its national security objectives and interests are articulated, both in action and in words, and also that people in the southern part of India, in peninsular India, need to know what are the threats that arise from Chinese expectations about how India develops. So last year's Deciphering China webinar was a part where we had 80 scholars, speakers from across the spectrum who spoke to us. And it was for the first time that such a major event had taken place outside Delhi. So we want Peninsular India to become a repository of knowledge, of wisdom, expertise, and consultancy on China. And I believe that China does not merely threaten us in the north, the, the north, the west, and the northeast, but yes, there are more than many indications of how Chinese seem to or will try and look at India from other angles, right from Sri Lanka, from Myanmar, from other areas where China is developing its strength in much more manner than what it has been earlier. Why did we choose this particular subject? Because I think in the national discourse on China, the conversation has remained focused on issues that had not brought into light the serious dangers we face from the Chinese advent into the rare earths environment. I think, if I'm not wrong, in 2008, the Chinese National People's Council passed an act which prohibited China from exploiting its own natural resources, but to lay emphasis on importing these resources. It wanted China to save its rare earth materials for a future. I think that was the beginning of a period that we needed to take notice. And especially in India, we need to take notice because export of rare earth materials has become a matter of export for us, matter of revenue earning. And how long this is going to fill the coffers and how long we're going to do this is something that we need to look at. Thirdly, what is important is you look at the areas around India, Myanmar, for example. There is so much mineral interest in Myanmar that the Chinese have focused particularly on the Rakhine state. And the Chinese interest in Rakhine state is not only meant to look at the Indian Ocean or the Bay of Bengal as its outlet from Yunnan province, but it's looking at the rare earth materials that lie in the southwestern state of Rakhine state or the Arakan state. We need to focus on this. We also need to focus on the extension of this thing into Bangladesh, because after all, Bangladesh is another strategic partner of ours, and the Chinese will wish to extend their influence into this particular area. As we all know, Arunachal Pradesh is itself an area which has got very vast deposits of rare earth material. So I think we need to understand the problem that lie nearer our borders. We need to understand what are the problems that lie in our neighborhood and its immediate concentric. And India needs to focus by way of policy, by way of being proactive, and trying to build coalitions or alliances with our neighbors to ensure that our interests are well protected and that the Chinese do not take much more than what is necessary for them. We have policies that seem to be working for us in Africa, in countries like Mozambique, Angola, where we are traditionally long-term partners of theirs, and we think we need to focus. Having said all this, then why did we look at, we wanted to hear from our colleagues in, say, in Japan, in Taiwan, in Australia, and in the US as to why this has become so important for us in the context of the 21st century China, and how do we react to all this? Are we on time, or are we behind time, or are we going to be ahead of time? What kind of policies do we need? I think the COVID-19 has created a new normal for us. The status quo of the past is no longer applicable. Do we need to think? what is the end result of our webinar? I would like to say that it should be a good handbook for policymakers, good textbook for people, academics who try to research this. Because if you look at some of the organizations in India, for example, the Geological Survey of India, I wish I had one of my colleagues was to attend, but he could not. But these are the kind of organizations we need to link: government, private world, others, research organizations, R&D institutions, and not forgetting our partners in ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific area. Having said all this, I think it is more important for us to spread knowledge. We are not creating anything that should go across, that should be counter to India's diplomatic relations with China, but we have a right to pursue our national interests and objectives. And I'm sure that today's get together, today's platform will provide us some picture and a way forward. With these few words, I thought I'll give you an overview of the program, but not the least, right to 2021, 1st of August to 2022, we are having a number of programs that will focus on China. Please be in touch with us. We will tell you what's happening next. The next couple of programs are going to be very exciting, going to be very interesting. It's going to generate a lot of interest in the minds of people who want to follow China, from either from Bangalore or from Chennai or from Delhi. The China Study Forum, which is now an amalgam of 4 institutions, we would like to partake of the help of others, whomsoever wants to participate with us. Thank you very much, and I wish the program the success which is due to it. Thank you. Over to you, Nisha.
Thank you, sir. We are honored to have Professor Dr. Bhimal N. Patel, Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University, and member, National Security Advisory Board with us today. May I now request Mr. Sashi Nair, Director and Editor of the Press Institute of India, to introduce Professor Dr. Bhimal N. Patel.
It's a pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Bhimal Patel. He's the Vice Chancellor of the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gandhinagar, an institution of national importance. He's a member of the National Security Advisory Board of India. Professor Patel has served as the Director or the Vice Chancellor of the Gujarat National Law University in Gandhinagar for 2 consecutive terms between 2008 and 2019. He has also served as a member of the 21st Law Commission of India during 2015 to 2018. Professor Patel obtained his PhD in International Law and Master of Laws from Leiden University in the Netherlands, and another doctorate in International Law from the Jaipur National University. Dr. Patel is a former international civil servant, scholar, and academician of international law and diplomacy. As an international law jurist, he has extensively studied, researched, commented, and published works on the administrative, procedural, and substantive jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, and the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Professor Patel has been instrumental in drafting many legislations, such as the Antarctic Act of India, Merchant Shipping Bill 2016, Private Maritime Security Companies Rules, and Deep Seabed Mining Act of India. He is visiting professor with the University of Nanterre in Paris, a fellow at the Institute of Air and Space Law, University of Cologne, Germany, the Hague Academy of International Law, the Netherlands, the Xiamen Academy of International Law in China, and the International Foundation for the Law of the Sea in Hamburg. We look forward to your inaugural address, Professor Patel.
Thank you very much. I thank Chennai Center for China Studies, Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, Press Institute of India. I'm very grateful to Mr. Ablikar, Mr. Nair, and my distinguished friend, Mr. Krishan Verma, for his valuable guidance and instrumental role. Thank you, Mr. Anandan, for all the coordination. The topics which we are going to cover today will give us global, or we can say macro, geopolitical and geostrategical, as well as economic security perspective. I'm sure the outcome and tangible suggestions emerging from this conference will be useful in complementing policy and operational measures undertaken by countries feeling vulnerability or want to prevent dominance or monopoly of any government for the greater good of sustainable development goals by 2030. The topics are known to us: perils of China's dominance in global rare earth supply chain, what should India do with its rare earth reserves, growing need to break China's dominance. And so all the topics which are being covered today are going to be extremely useful. Friends, REE or rare earth, if we use, are crucial raw materials for use in high-tech applications in various strategic sectors such as defense, atomic energy, space, oil, green energy, electronics. These are also the precise areas in which India is willing to grow fast, and these are game changers for India's future of economic, political, and security clout and development. Our vision of the minerals vertical is to prepare strategic policies for the sector to ensure, number one, the enhanced exploration and extraction of minerals, raw material security for all user industries, focus on rare earths and technology minerals, ensure, very importantly, overall sustainability, generate more employment opportunities, and decrease overall minerals import and enhance export. So this is broad vision of our minerals vertical as far as REE is concerned. While we are all aware that as many as 35 rare earth minerals, we particularly have huge interest in 12 strategic minerals. Those are tin, cobalt, lithium, germanium, gallium, lanthanum, beryllium, niobium, tantalum, tungsten, bismuth, and selenium at this stage. For example, US Department of Interior sometime back, I think 2018, identified 35 critical minerals for national and economic security, and US is counting on mainly 17 of those, whereas as I said, we are looking at 12 strategic minerals. So totally we are talking 35. Some of us, and a number of you may have read the 2020 Niti Aayog report, which gives latest updates on the vision mission of REE. Friends, we are facing situations similar to 1970s. High inflation coupled with stagflation and rising oil prices, making us very, very economically vulnerable. And on top of that, we are having a monopoly or dominance of one government across the board. Therefore, the first thing is, like what major countries have done, we need to work out our vulnerability map. How much REE were imported, for example. Report shows that US, it imports 98% processed REE from China in 2018. Like United States also, we also face problems of refining capacity. Although India has the advantage of labor costs, I would say reasonable environmental regulations, which are definitely strict, which China can easily afford. In this regard, I would like to quote, and the quote goes, "Our nation's undue reliance on critical minerals in processed or unprocessed form from foreign adversaries constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States." The former President Trump wrote, "I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat." What I'm trying to say, when President Trump signed this executive order, the US has considered this as a national emergency. In other words, countries like India also, Japan also, we are facing the same issues. US measures are important reminders as how a vulnerable nation can cope up with this challenge. If you look at Executive Order 13,817 or late in 2020, if you look at Executive Order 13,953, clearly lay down the mission of the United States, how to overcome this vulnerability. We in India, we need to begin mineral extractor strikes and refinement projects. And in this regard, strategic partnerships are definitely possible with friendly countries. Increasing tariffs on imports from China, and that is what China has been doing, can be considered with all its implications, but I am particularly satisfied that with Atmanirbhar Bharat mission, involving even possible legal disputes if a country like China would increase tariff on imports from a country like India, we can certainly avoid through a national security exception clause. So there are possibilities. As my distinguished predecessor spoke, Chinese reliance on Myanmar for reconcentration, particularly in 2020, is known. No surprise why China in the Security Council, and as India is also a member, why China is silent, what is happening in Myanmar, and why a country like India should try to protect and promote interests with our eastern neighbor, Myanmar. United States, as I mentioned, has huge vulnerability, but US has luxury because US has already worked out, carved out relations, strategic partnerships with Denmark, Greenland, Mexico, some of the Latin American countries, which India does not have. In other words, our vulnerability is multifold, and we have few options while the challenges and the goals are very high. Since I mentioned about how to go about friendly countries, we all know that the governments of Australia, Botswana, Canada, Peru, and United States, they founded the Energy Resource Governance Initiative. The ERGI has definitely goals. I'm unaware, but I believe that India can consider this option of becoming a partner of ERGI initiative, like what we have Solar Energy Initiative, which India took a lead. Similarly, India, realizing the vulnerability and its dependence, can consider becoming a member of Energy Resource Governance Initiative, which our strategic partner, United States and Australia, are members of. Research institutions like Rashtriya University or IITs can undertake case studies For example, as my distinguished predecessor mentioned, our rare earth reserves in particular areas of eastern regions. Now we are talking here indigenous engagement, a case study on indigenous engagement, case study on public-private partnership, case study on awarding mineral leases, case study on social license to operate, case study on environmental management, case study on red dog mine. Responsible mining requires thoughtful policy from start to finish, before the soil hit dirt and after the mine closed down. The case study, when I was working for this address, it is called Red Dog Mine Project, which has been taken by ERGI. This particular project embodies this responsible attitude and demonstrates an equitable balance between people, profit, and the planet. Why United States has done it? Because US did not want dirty pollution in its territorial lands, which China could afford. We are in a dynamic situation. As I said, we have low labor cost, we have reasonable environmental standards. So these kind of case studies would be very useful to the policymakers in the government. India can consider reducing its reliance on China to significant percentage as a national security goal. We know Japan plans to bring its reliance on imports from China by less than 50% in 2025. Why? We all are aware how China cut off mineral supply to Japan on issue of Senkaku Islands. China employed a combination of economic warfare, usually legally permissible tools, or we can say lawfare using economic tools. I'm sure Dr. Satoru Nagao will be able to bring some useful insights, as like United States, Japan also feels vulnerable. Japan also set up the goal, and I'm quite sure Dr. Nagao will be able to tell us the progress as far as the reliance of Japan on imports from China is concerned. Some of the initiatives which India has taken, particularly with Africa, does hold huge futures. Our relations with Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, South Africa, but I would also say Tanzania, Burundi, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. In other words, realizing the potential and our genuine partnership with African countries, unlike just economic exploitation that was done by China, and earlier the colonial powers such as Germany, United Kingdom, and France are very bitter reminders to our African friends. India, as a benign, friendly country across the globe, in this regard, can actually forge very good partnership with African countries and give a different model, which China could not provide, and of course, as I said, former colonial powers of Europe could not provide. Africa will remain crucial to Chinese rare earth supply chains, and therefore for India as well. Of course, I'm not going into the statistics, but as one excellent paper in which Cohen and Grant summarizes, China commands 85% of RE export market, 62% of global raw mineral materials, importing 2 billion worth of critical materials and REs. And as I was mentioning about lawfare, in the event of an acute international crisis, China would likely to use its leverage to further geostrategic aims by imposing critical mineral embargoes. I give an example of Japan already in this respect. China can indeed use unilateral measures, an international legal tool which has been famously used so far in the United States, be it CATSA or otherwise. In other words, China learning the tricks from Western powers can use the unilateral international legal measures to impose embargoes. And therefore, the war is already on. I believe that developing domestic capacities to mine and refine critical minerals across India can be a very important priority for all our agencies. But at the same time, our private sector can become the primary driver instead of government in the production like other minerals, mining and processing. As we all know, reports are there that the Biden administration is under pressure to reauthorize the Defense Production Act to speed up the planning, construction and operation of some of the mineral facilities. The names are known to all of us, as expanding domestic mineral projects address a key strategic vulnerability. India, following this call and already feeling the heat, have to move ahead. In this regard, again, while preparing for this address, the Atmanirbhar Bharat of the Prime Minister reminds me to what President Nixon had done in 1973 in the wake of oil embargo. President Nixon in 1973 declared Project Independence. Some of you might be knowing already. In this respect, the Prime Minister of India's vision is very far-sighted. And I may say that this vision and mission must be harnessed with all sincerity, otherwise country will pay the price of the peril. Friends, we need policies, plans, strategic alliances, as I said also research cells across universities, think tanks like the one we have today, but very importantly, target goals like what Japan has already subscribed to. Another important work done by National Security Council Secretariat of India and Niti Aayog is our Arctic strategy. China calls Arctic as a near neighbor. Why? Because China wants access to these resources, which are said to include over 90 billion barrels of oil and estimated $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals, metals. As we all know, India is a member, one of the 7 members of the famous Spitsbergen Treaty of 1921. As we celebrate 100 years, it is time for us, though this treaty was signed by the then Emperor India, India has to rejuvenate its interest in the Spitsbergen Treaty, because the Spitsbergen Treaty, in which China was never a party. China became much later, I think in this century only, and has started calling, Arctic as almost kind of distant neighbor. As India prepares for defense manufacturing base, and as I said, Honorable Prime Minister would like that India becomes Atmanirbhar in this sector, the REE will become essential. Be it fighter engines, missile guidance systems, or space-based satellites, communication systems. Atmanirbhar Bharat in these areas can only be achieved if we have sustainable strategies for this. I give you the statistics about rare earth, but rare earth elements are not necessarily scarce, but they are hard to locate actually. Instead of appearing as rain in rock formation like gold or silver, capturing rare earth requires miners to extract a large volume of rock and then process it to separate rare earth elements, which I just mentioned earlier. This applies because we are fifth largest reported reservoirs of REE. And here comes the role of research institutions and technology institutions like IITs or Indian Institute of Technologies. As I say, rare earth elements are not necessarily scarce, but they are hard to locate. And then the issue of processing and refining comes. Why US is vulnerable today, which was once 30 years back. US was 30 years back global rare earth controlling market of the world because United States had different policy preferences. China used in this last 30 years low cost, lax environmental standards, and government determination to change from the entire narrative. Now China is controlling the global market. Friends, India has all three. As I say, low labor cost, environmental framework, and government vision and mission. What we need to do is we have to produce more efficiently and more economically than China and other countries. If this happens, and now that we have partnerships with US, Australia, and Japan, the Quad, so we can see Quad not only helping stabilize the oceanic order, but also help stabilizing the monopoly of any particular government. I'm more concerned about the sustainable development goals for my country, but also for the globe as a whole. And when we are talking SDG, we cannot have any country with India, with China, with United States controlling the entire global market, because then we'll be failing global citizens from the developmental needs. And here again, our model of partnerships with Africa, which also holds great future as far as the SDGs are concerned, comes into play because, as I say, ours is a benign model. Ours is a genuine partnerships. And this is what needs to be done. Already, our Indian Rare Earth Minerals Limited have prepared roadmaps, and the observations of the previous chairman are very illuminating. And I believe persons like Dr. R.N. Patra, the previous chairman, and those who have been in this IRIL, they can help us, institutions like RRU, IITs, and also strategic institutions like the China Study Center, the IBSA. So we can work technology, security, and the geostrategic and geopolitical think tanks to realize the government mission. As I said earlier, we have the fifth largest reserves, nearly twice as much as Australia. Thus, we are capable of becoming what China is doing today. But what we require is the strategies. And if that happens, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to achieve the mission of Atmanirbhar Bharat in this regard as well. No doubt, there are reforms, there are challenges, but with the right kind of leadership, right kind of institutional backup, and very importantly, National Security Council and the Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, taking lead on various of these security initiatives, I believe that we can find right partnerships within India and outside India to provide necessary policy input, actionable research input to policymakers, and we can also be involved in number of operational activities through undertaking case studies, which I mentioned, and also play a very important role in this ERGI initiative at governmental level, but also at think tank level. Once again, I thank you all for organizing this international conference. I'm extremely grateful for my international participants, friendly countries, and my colleagues in various think tanks across the country. And we look forward and we assure you fullest and complete support in this mission of protecting and promoting national security and foreign policy interests of India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your gracious remarks and insightful perspectives that have laid a foundation for the day's proceedings. Thank you for joining us today. To deliver the keynote address, we have Mr. Nabil Mancheri, Secretary General, the Global Rare Earth Industry Association, Brussels. To introduce Mr. Mancheri, Mr. Nabil Mancheri was formerly a senior researcher and project manager at the Department of Material Engineering, KU Leuven, Belgium. Before joining KU Leuven in 2018, he was a Marie Curie Fellow at the Institute of Environmental Sciences, CML, at the Leiden University in the Netherlands. A PhD holder from Jawaharlal Nehru University, he has held academic positions in universities in India, Japan, the Netherlands, and has been a visiting fellow in universities in China, the US, and Australia. He was named one of the top emerging geoeconomists in the world by Johns Hopkins University, US. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Mancheri. I now hand it over to you to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Nisha, for the nice introduction. And maybe you can ask your colleague to share my slides. That's better. And while I speak, and I thank the China Studies Forum, which is a great initiative of the ICSB, Chennai Center for China Studies and President Institute of India. And it's actually, I appreciate and I congratulate the team for coming up with this nice idea. And thanks, Mr. Hebilkar, Mr. Shashi Nair, and others for providing me an opportunity to give you a small speech. And Professor Mr. Hebilkar and Professor Patel has given you a nice background. So I'm not need to explain you what is rare earth and where it is used, but rather I would focus what is the current global market situation, what is the vulnerabilities. Nisha, can you see if you can share my screen?
1 second, sir. It's coming up, sir.
Okay. Okay, so as they move, like Nisha said, I am the Secretary General at the Global Rare Earth Industry Association. Next slide, please. Which is a global association founded in 2019 with the support of European Commission. And now we have grown to 40 members and with the multicultural and experience board and advisory board. Next slide, please. So we also work with a number of global associates and government entities, largely from European Commission side, and also Department of Energy in US, which is an institute called Critical Material Institutes. It's actually like Professor Patel mentioned that US has initiated a number of initiatives to check to improve the supply diversification. This was one of the research aspect of bringing the Critical Material Institute after the 2010 crisis. Then we are also partnering with Natural Resource Canada, and of course from Japan, JOCMEC, which is active in the raw material field. And after the 2010 crisis, they invested considerable amount of money in a couple of rare earth companies to secure, and Japan was successful in diversifying their supply. And of course, we are also partnering to develop the international standard on rare earth, which is actually led by India is a member of the ISO TC 98, which is on rare earth. But China, standardization organization is the leader. But Japan is very active, US is very active, and some of the European countries are very active in this association. Next one, please. So our mission is that the association, why the European Commission set up this was basically to provide the information, because the world was in the dark when the 2010 crisis happened. Then the world realized, how important this is. So our main mission is to promote a sustainable, because Dr. Patel also mentioned sustainability is the key for the coming industrialization. So sustainable, responsible, and collaborative and transparent. There are also transparency issues. Both of these previous speakers mentioned the importance of Myanmar, the illegal trade between Myanmar, the Rakhine state, and the Chinese companies. So this is the transparency is key. So need to coordinate all these things. We need an international organization. The background was something like, the oil crisis happened in 1703. The world leaders came up with the International Energy Agency. So something like that, but we work as an international organization. Next one, please. So to give you a background, I'm not talking about what is the rare earth, but we should be aware of this is not an easy subject, and this is not something like iron, copper, or aluminum. Like Patel said, this is, it's not rare, but it's actually rare. It is difficult to process, and there are a number of midstream value chain. So China has built this industry for last 30 years. We need to realize that, and to crack that market, to crack that dominance, you need multi-agency, multi-industry effort. Especially, I'm talking with reference to India, and we need to see this as a strategic sector. Something we did with our atomic energy program, our space program. We need to see this as a strategic industry. If you want to build an industry for the 2050, if you're looking for a carbon neutral world, if you are looking for new energy like wind energy in 50 years, so it's a long-term strategy, and you need these materials. And basic thing, one of the basic thing is that these materials are used very powerful permanent magnets, and which is called NdFeB, and those are the one that is used in electric mobility and a lot of small application, defense applications, and wind turbines. But also others are also other elements are also important in batteries, battery storage, catalysts. For example, now we use a lot of rare earth. This oxide we import from China because we are a large consumer of the petroleum. So we use this for refining. Our refining companies are use this material for their petroleum refining. So, and ceramic, the importance of both defense and other applications of ceramics. So this is very important. Next one, please. So what happened? We wrote at National Institute of Advanced Studies, and me and my senior colleague wrote a report in 2013, dominating the world, China and the rare earth industry. And even after 8 years, 10 years, China still dominate. But with the great help of Japan, the dependence, many of the countries have been able to reduce their dependence on China. And if you look at this table, at the mine, now this figure looks at the mine, who are the miners, but that's not the case. If you mine, doesn't make any sense now, because you need to process it, you need to make into the oxide, you need to, next value chain is you want to make it to the metal. And for example, to make metal, you don't have many companies or many countries who are able to make metals, and then metal goes to the other applications that I show in the previous year. So China still control about 75% of the material mined, and rest of the world like US 11%, but that 11% after initial processing, the concentrate goes to China, processed there, because that mine is 10% owned by a Chinese company, the Europe mine. Then the Myanmar, the case, there are a lot of formal trade between Myanmar and also informal trade between the Myanmar, the border states. And most important one, about 75%, in rare earth, they are called 17 elements. They're called lower rare earth and heavy rare earth. And 75% of the Chinese demand are met by the import from Myanmar for the heavy minerals. This is very critical. Dysprosium, terbium, and thulium. So, and this is very critical quantity wise. Annual production is very less, but still a lot of China is dependent on Myanmar for a lot of, because to process this material in southern China, this was a kind of artisanal mining and semi-illegal processing. So China has cracked down or stopped this kind of production. So they depend on for other materials, and China is looking for resources, and China will be a net resource importer to meet their demand. And 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 you think, okay, we can mine, but China has also built strategically that you will think you can mine, but you can mine when you can process, but you will not be able to compete with China in that value chain, even if you have the resources, because China has strategically built. I will go through how China built that, and or what is the Chinese current policies. Next one, please. So four key themes that emerged in last years. Chinese policy. China rigorously implement annual basis. They very strategically look at this sector and improve their policies and they knows where the material is going. Not only the countries, they knows where the material, each of these 17 elements, which company is consuming what material. So the case of Taiwan, there was a discussion that when Lockheed Martin tried to sell something to Taiwan, they were able to identify their supply chain were limited with China. So they were warning to Lockheed Martin not to do that. So Chinese knows not only the countries where the material is going, Chinese also knows which companies are using that. That's the one, Chinese policies. So anytime they have an export control law, like many other countries in the Western world, they have a number of restrictions, and this is 100%, even if not Chinese government owned, but it is controlled. Then China also knows very critical materials. They have a national and private-led stockpiling policies. That's really important. And also countries like US and Japan also have, and like we have in the oil reserves or oil stockpiling, they also have critical material stockpiling policies. And for short-term break, what happened in 2010 was actually an eye-opener. If something happens, Chinese suddenly, so you don't need face a problem at least for 1 month or 2 months. You don't face such problems. Then China has been increasing their quota allocation for processing and reducing the quota for mining activities. So because they get the material from, and China makes that the countries, those who mine, it's the company, for the companies, mining companies, it is profitable for them to send the material to China instead of they processing themselves and selling the oxide, or even making the even beyond the value chain. For example, if you tell about the magnets, so they may make sure that none of the companies from around the world are not able to compete with China. They have a number of strategies, and how that work I will go through. Next one, please. So the fact that we all aware of that China dominates the first finished rare earth oxide output now about 85%, because now Lynas, the Australian company, is making oxide in Malaysia, and in Estonia there is one company, European company, a joint venture, a company, multinational company headquartered in Canada. Then of course in India, one Japanese company is IREL provide the feedstock to the Japanese company of Toyota Tsusho in Visakhapatnam, and that's actually exported to Japan, usually for the Toyota, but also Toyota's tier 1 suppliers or other customers. And out of this, on the oxide level, out of this total production, China export about 30% output as rare earth oxide. This is largely the low level, like low priced lanthanum and cerium, which is critical for petroleum industry, glass industry, ceramics, etc. And you don't have many, except Japan, you don't have many magnet manufacturers. So those who will use neodymium or praseodymium for magnets or dysprosium. So so as a result, climate change is the big issue coming in next decades. So climate change based regulation demand for sustainable energy and transport is strongly growing, that we all know, which drives the demand for rare earth and rare earth magnets. This comes in increased rare earth material import demand in China. So as these, China move their earth value chain, China will be a net importer of this material. Next one, please. So I said, 71% of the global market is dominated by the NdFeB magnets, and China's market share is 90%, and 10% of that is probably close to 10% is probably the Japanese companies, 3 of them which make NdFeB magnets, but they don't have enough capacity. They have production plant in Japan and Vietnam, and maybe 1-2% of production by a European American shareholding company. And then China is the default destination for. So now, you have here, there are resources in Africa, there are materials for mining in Canada, there are a number of projects, there are material available in Australia, there are material available in India. But what is the default? Like I said before, the default destination for this junior, we call them, it's not big companies, small companies, junior RE miners, output of rare earth materials. And so you have whatever you produce, if you want to make profit, you have to export that to China if you want to make profit, because you don't have big market for these countries. And ex-China rare earth oxide production and NdFeB production face hidden challenges. If you start production, you have to take it as a strategic sector, and there are hidden challenges. Next one, please. So a simple look at the Chinese, how Chinese play a game with the tariff and quotas. For example, for the Chinese companies, there is a 13% VAT on every rare earth metal for all individual rare earth metal, and for this level, this is an intermediate product. After oxide, you make it as a metal, and Chinese companies don't get VAT refund upon export. And there is also a general tariff rate of 30%. This is how they manipulate the global market. And also, there is an additional tariff on US import. If you are importing, so China knows US can produce these materials internally, but if they want to import these things to China, the Chinese companies have to pay additional import tariff. Interestingly, if you look at the next one in the value chain for the permanent magnet industry, so there is also a 30% VAT, but interestingly, the Chinese companies get VAT refund 13%. That VAT you get back when you export this material to other countries. The Chinese companies get back these taxes. And additionally, if any company buy any permanent magnet from US especially, then you have an additional 20% extra tax. So this is and for other kind of rare earth like samarium cobalt, you have 25% additional tax. The next one. Yeah, and this is also on what, because on the concentrate level you see, and you don't have you have the 13% and VAT, but for Chinese government don't provide the VAT refund on this export. Okay, next one. Okay, so what does it mean for the global market and the companies? All prices in China contain value add tax, and what is not separately. So if you buy something from China, which is including the VAT price, same for rare earth oxide metals magnets price, that inclusive 13% VAT. And what is a consumption tax, and which is actually WTO compliance. So no countries can question these Chinese policies in WTO. So that's the main thing. How they, their quota policy. There was a case in the WTO when China, have export quotas that was not, in alignment with the WTO. So, but in this case, you cannot question this in the WTO. And upon export from China, however, there is no VAT refund for rare earth, but there is a, like I said before, there is a full 30% VAT refund upon export of permanent magnet. So it's actually make Chinese permanent magnet industry very competitive, and 20%. If you compare with other, if you talk about the companies outside China, they say the cost margin is 20%. So it's a huge impact on the global market, and especially in the initial stage, this is 30% difference raw material cost can be the difference between profit and loss. Next one, please. So to put it rather simple, what Chinese government tells us, the rest of the world, rare earth raw materials we want from you to preserve our resource. So it is duty-free import, no resource tax on imports. Yeah. Then finished rare earth products, we will give you only if your cost will be higher than our own users' cost. So if any company are using this, you are buying oxide to make a permanent magnet, your magnet you are selling to the global market will be much higher than the Chinese are selling to the global market. So this is, so no refund on export. Then we will fill you up to your neck with magnets because it's cheap to produce. You have the VAT refund, and that is the highest in the intermediate level. That is the highest added value product made from until your last magnet maker is gone. So that is full VAT refund upon export. Then we will not provide you easy market access for your homemade rare earth that you have nowhere else to go with it. So import duty for rare earth oxide while raw material is duty free. So that is how China is build up their global market strategy. I think this is the last one. Next one, please. Yeah. Okay. So this is the last one, and if you have, I have concentrated a bit on the economic side of how the global market is dominated by China. And if you have any questions or concerns, please email me or ask questions. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Nabil Mancheri, for that enlightening presentation. You have brought our attention to the key issues and set a clear tone for the presentations that will follow. Thank you. Before we move on, I request all the speakers to kindly adhere to the timings indicated to them, which is 20 minutes for each presentation. Thank you for your cooperation. I am delighted to introduce to you our next speaker. Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan is a former Deputy Chief of the Army and a former member of the Armed Forces Tribunal. As the Deputy Chief, he was responsible for perspective planning, financial planning, and capital acquisitions programs of the Indian Army. He has been on the board of directors of Bharat Electronics Limited and Bharat Dynamics Limited. He is a prolific writer on subjects such as strategic issues, rare earths, and space mining, among others. He also serves in an advisory capacity to defense industries as well as entrepreneurs contemplating entry into the defense manufacturing arena. It is a privilege to have you with us, sir, and without further ado, I hand it over to Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan to speak to us on the topic, Perils of China's Dominance in Global Rare Earth Supply Chain and India's Fleeting Opportunity. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, it's my privilege to be part of this event on rare earths and to share this platform with such distinguished panelists. And let me thank Mr. Heplikar, Mr. Kishan Verma, Mr. Shashi Nair, Professor Bhimal Patel, and their respective organizations for organizing this event and for having me on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, coming straight into the subject, Mr. Nabil Mancheri and Professor Bhimal, they have given us an exhaustive insight into the world of rare earths, which has made my job and the job of people to follow much easier. I will avoid repetition and confine myself to elaborating certain very important aspects of REs, rare earths, to give it an Indian perspective. And especially as we look at India in the coming 2 to 3 decades, and thereafter, in the end, I will round it up with a very brief peep into the Indian mineral industry for a holistic understanding. Now, on to this, I must just give a little wording to start with. Sometimes these slides do hang a little, so bear with me if that happens for an odd extra minute or so. The annual production as of 2020 was 240,000 metric tons. We will not go into who produced what. I will only try to emphasize on one aspect. The largest ocean liners which are in service today, they carry about twice this amount in one lift. So the quantity of the upstream mineral resources of rare earth which we are talking about is just about that much. Whichever countries, these are the rare earth reserve. There is nothing much to talk about. You are all aware of it. We also have, the Japanese, some findings of rare earths. Fortunately, it's on their eastern coast. Otherwise, China would have drawn another dashed line to probably claim that also. But this resource is at a depth of about 6,000 meters. So even for the Japanese, the technology to tap this finding from 6,000 meters depth will take a few years. Now, it'll be interesting. I've talked about quantity, which is about 240,000 metric tons. Let's look at rare earths, the entire mineral industry from the point of view of the global mineral industry as a whole. In 2016, the top 20 countries in the world produced minerals worth $1,375 billion. And coming to 2019, just the top 40 global mining companies, their revenue was a whopping $700 billion. Now, let's just superimpose the rare earths into this. The annual upstream mineral cost of rare earths is about $4 to $5 billion, which doesn't look very significant, nor does the quantity look insignificant the way I touched upon initially. So despite this, we are all talking about rare earths. The whole world seems to be talking about rare earths. And the simple reason is that today it has application across industries, whether defense industries, strategic industries, consumer industries, space, petroleum, everything. And it is required in smaller quantities, but it is irreplaceable as of now. There is no substitute, and therefore the criticality of rare earths. That is just a spectrum of industries which use it, from fighter jets to ballistic missiles, laptops or mobiles, ceramics, nuclear reactors, green technology. The single largest use, as already brought out very beautifully, it is the powerful, lightweight, miniature application everywhere, whether it's a car door's window or whether it is a laptop, whether it is a vibrator in the mobile phone, they all use it, or whether on a wind turbine. Now, what is most significant is, the dependency on China, Mr. Nabil has brought about. But one thing I would like to emphasize is, till 80s, the United States had the monopoly. How did it change to China? Of course, China had the predominant resource, advantage, but that wasn't the reason. The reason was environmental concerns and the dubious means, the mostly unfair means which China used to arm twist even the downstream industries to ship base into China. So he's explained to us how it came about. The monopoly shifted from US to China. But what is significant is The monopoly is so pronounced today that a few years back, United States realized that for their frontline F-35 fighter aircraft, for every single aircraft, it required about 400 kilograms of rare earth mineral sourced from China. And that is the kind of dependency on China, even for defense industries or strategic industries. Now, at this stage, I want to step aside from rare earths and take a look at India. How do we see the next 2 to 3 decades? Whether it is GDP or our per capita GDP in the next 2 to 3 decades, we are looking at, and without hesitation, one can say we are on track for a jump, 4 to 5 times jump in our GDP as well as in our per capita GDP. Now, what does this translate into? Now, this translates into certain economic development indicators. I will request you to focus on the figures which I have given opposite India, that is in red markings. Look at the first 2 columns. That is, the first one is, the second one is the total carbon emission as a country. We are already up the world. But now this needs to be viewed in the context of the next 4 figures. Those are all per capita figures, whether it is per capita GDP, per capita electricity consumption, energy consumption, or the per capita carbon emission. Look at our figures, compare it to the others. We are at the rock bottom. So as we visualize or we aspire for in the next 2 to 3 decades for our GDP and per capita GDP to go, these figures will all do a corresponding 4 to 5 times. Now come to the first figure again, like total energy consumption of our country will have to go up 4 to 5 times. There is no other way, or well-being of our people without doing this. So naturally, if the energy consumption go up, the total carbon emission too will go up. But can we afford to do that? Can we afford our total carbon emission, which is there on already, to go up by about 4 to 5 times? The world will not let us do that. Even if they do, will we do that? We cannot afford to do that because we'll actually be destroying our planet. So what is the way out? We have to do the 4 to 5 fold jump. That remains an imperative. There is no that is not negotiable. So what is the only way out? The only way, ladies and gentlemen, is to go in a big way towards efficient, modern, high-tech industries, and also in a big way go for green technology. Now, that is the only way we can achieve. We are not looking at a century ahead. I am talking about just 2 to 3 decades ahead. Now we need to introspect. Are we really doing something about it? Let's take a look at that. Yes, in one of the segments, that is electric vehicles, we seem to be, at least our vision seems to be on the right track. The vehicles on road today, about 200 million two-wheelers, 40 million four-wheelers, these numbers are all set to double by 2030. And we have very ambitious targets for going electric. 30% of our entire vehicle fleet by 2030. But what we need to understand is this is our vision. Now, to put this vision, actually translate it into action, you are very heavily dependent on the rare earths. The reason being, for every electric vehicle is so heavily dependent on rare earths. See the number of components which are dependent on rare earths, ladies and gentlemen. In particular, the most critical component of an electric vehicle are the electric motors. There are about 25 subsidiary motors and 1 main motor. All of them, they will go nowhere without rare earth. So that is one aspect we must keep in mind. The second segment is the wind energy. The wind turbines, the modern efficient wind turbines, which are very efficient, high yielding, lightweight, which require very little maintenance. they require to the tune of about 200 kilograms of rare earth material for every megawatt capacity of the wind turbine. So if you have a 10 megawatt capacity wind turbine, you need about 2 tons of rare earth material for each of these wind turbines. Now, let's take a, seeing the Chinese monopoly in rare earth and the dependency of rare earth on clean energy, let's look at one segment of clean energy which is not dependent on rare earth, and that is the solar. Now see again the monopoly of China. 71% of global solar PV modules in 2019 came from China. So, it is not just rare earth. It is almost near total dependency on clean energy. Now, take your mind back to what I said. In the next 2 to 3 decades, if we have to take 4 to 5 times jump, we have no alternative but to go totally clean and be dependent on the industries, the green industry. Now, the solar monopoly of China followed exactly the same script as the rare earth story. In 2000, 2004, US was the predominant solar manufacturer. Just see where the white line, that is the Chinese line, the blue line is the US line, where they have actually where each one of these have gone in the next 15 years, starting from 2004, 2006. The bottom line is that for green energy, there is a very high dependency, very high supply risk for rare earths. We need to keep that in mind. Now, let's take a look at the industries, the modern high-tech industries other than clean energy. For example, let's take the mobile devices. There are 7 billion devices in service today. The annual edition, annually sold mobile handset of 1400 million devices. Each one of them carry a little bit of rare earth in it. So, and here is the spectrum of modern high-tech industries which run very high supply risk of rare earths. So whether it is green technology, defense strategic, fuel cells, robotics, drones, ICT, entire ICT industry. So, it just emphasizing and re-emphasizing the point that no country may be able to go anywhere unless we focus on these issues. Now, with so much of dependency, is the world waking up? I'm definite that we are not the first ones to understand this, nor am I the first one to flag this in a webinar or a seminar or to the respective governments. The answer is that the world is certainly waking up to it. At least the major stakeholders in the world are. Like the United Kingdom has set up its first RE refinery. Concentrates are coming from as far away as Tanzania, the raw material, and it is being done with the help of an Australian firm, Peak Resources. There is a REPM project the permanent magnet project being put up by the British government. This is with a company called LCM London. Incidentally, it may interest you to know that there is an Indian company which has controlling stakes in LCM London. That is just besides the point. EU is again into RE and REPM manufacturing. They have set up the process. There is a combined monazite based. It should be of particular interest to India because it is monazite based. EU and US, the Canadian firm is Neoperforma Material and the US firms are Energy Fuels and Chemours. Now, the others too, US is into it in a big way, whether it is actually reviving their old processing facility or jointly with America's Lena's firm, or through regulations in the form of Defense Authorization Act, which bans use of Chinese permanent magnets in the defense products. Canada again is setting up a monazite-based rare earth permanent magnet facility. Australia and Japan are already well up. So all the major stakeholders, in particular the Quad members, are all into it. They are all busy. They are all well into it and making good progress. Though there's only one major stakeholder who is missing from action, and that happens to be us. India. Now, why is it? It's a very strange phenomena. We are doing so much in everything else. Why aren't we doing so much in rare earth? Is it because of lack of resources, or is it because of our incompetent policies over 75 years, or is it because of fear of corruption of illegal mining, or is it because of fear of environmental degradation? Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we go, we'll touch upon, see some of these aspects. India is blessed with monazite resources in the form of beach sand minerals. We have one of the largest deposits in the world in the form of beach sand minerals. Beach sand minerals has the advantage of composite mining. Mr. Nabil Mancheri explained to us in great detail as to how China is undercutting the price. Now, therefore, mining in isolation, actually, very difficult to make it economical. Here we have a situation, the resource that we have has a tremendous advantage of composite mining. And what is that? Beach sand minerals is the source for many extremely extensively used heavy minerals in the industry called ilmenite, zircon, garnet, etc. So after extracting these from beach sand minerals, what is left is a monazite deposit, which contains rare earths and thorium. And imagine it contains thorium, which is a very important component of our three-stage vision for nuclear energy. So unfortunately, because of our inhibition, whether it is fear or wanting to preserve the thorium or the hesitation in storage, we have totally blocked this route of the monazite mining and making use of rare earth. We have in fact stopped mining the entire beach sand mineral, ilmenite, zircon, garnet, etc. Even those are being imported now. This is actually a very sad state, and we need to get over this. So where are we today in rare earths? Our monazite resources, as I just touched upon, remains unexploited. Would you believe it? I have a large number of mining friends. We have the capacity to produce. India has the capacity to produce, in conjunction with a lot of friends from Australia and UK, who are willing to join up with India to produce rare earth permanent magnets in India in a matter of 2 to 3 years. And we have dead stock of monazite containing rare earth to the tune of thousands of tons, held in concrete storage tanks along our eastern coast. This is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. We don't even have to mine. They are readily available. So they are lying unexploited. We have no downstream rare earth industry worth the name. What are we as of now? We are a low value downstream material supplier in the rare earth industry. This is despite the fact that we have had adequate signals in the recent past in the form of, we know the API monopoly and how it actually can arm twist the entire pharma industry, which is one of the strengths of India, pharma industry. But they are at the mercy of API. You all know what it is. I will not go into it. Semiconductors. This is a very recent phenomena. Do you know, you go and book a car today, not just the high-end car, any car, the dealer will tell you, give you a delivery date of 6 months from today. Why? Not because of any shortage except semiconductor shortage. That is the kind of effect which an upstream component can make, and that is what we are looking at. We will go nowhere in going green, nowhere in carbon emission reduction unless we wake up in time. Covishield ingredients, we have again seen what people can hold us to ransom. And the latest warning, very loud warning, is the EU's carbon tax proposal, ladies and gentlemen. You know what EU has proposed and what this holds for us. Now, if this is the situation, what do we need? We need focused policy without delay. Now, without delay is very important, most critical. The reason being, once the downstream value chain, downstream supply chain is established by countries coming together, like we have just seen, US, Australia, Japan, all the EU, nobody will have any time for us. We will not find it, we will find it impossible to make an economical entry or do anything at all with our monocyte resources. We need to do it without delay. We must involve private industries, foreign partners, joint venture, PPP, whatever model, and we must also start taking a lot of, invest in the R&D. Now, therefore, what do we need? Actually, there is a silver lining in all that I have said. Most of our problems have very complex, intricate solutions with long gestation period. In the case of rare earth, it is not so. We have just a simple solution to this problem, and that is a bold policy decision. And the gestation period is almost zero. Now, for this policy decision, again, the silver lining is at no point in our history we appeared in a better position to take strong policy decisions. Now, having seen all this about rare earths, ladies and gentlemen, the picture will be incomplete unless I put it in perspective by giving you a very short, very brief peep into the Indian mineral industry as a whole. India geologically is similar to resource-rich regions of the world, whether it is Western Australia, whether it is parts of Africa, South Africa, or parts of USA, Ghana, etc. But what does it relate into our exploitation of our mineral resources? It does not. Just see these figures. We produce only 1/7 of our mineral requirements. Imagine rest of it, 6/7 are imported, and look at the bills. Look at our Manipur, the mineral imports that we do every day, and compare it to what we produce domestically. Now, why is this so? To understand this in a layman's language, we'll have to take a very brief look at the chain, the flow chart of minerals. Right on top, we have mineral resources. It is established that we have good mineral resources. Next comes base survey and baseline geoscience data. Now, this is a general survey of what is being, an assessment of the mineral wealth of a country, a general assessment. Now, base survey and baseline geoscience data is done by the GSI, the Geological Survey of India. And you ask any miner, they will tell you the base survey, baseline geoscience data of India held by GSI is world class. Notwithstanding a little scope for improvement in digitization, a little more digitization, and making the data, putting the data in the public domain. So if we have these two, we are well up. What is the next? That is exploration. Exploration is what actually connects the resources into proper mining. Once exploration actually fixes the location, fixes the value, the specific value. Once that is done, the government can issue license, policy, lease, etc., and the mining can continue. I must say a word about exploration here. Exploration is the prime mover of mining, ladies and gentlemen. It is an entity of its own. It's a very high risk proposition. Mineral exploration industry is referred to by miners as junior mining industry. And do you know something? Junior mining industry to mineral mining is what tech startups are to the IT industry. We see tech startups, sprouting all over the country. Most of them actually perish. But you have a handful of them becoming, unicorns and semi-unicorns. That is exactly the dynamics which the junior mining industry is supposed to provide for the mineral exploration. They are the ones who actually de-risk mining properties and look to be bought out. The success probability, of exploration is 1:100. That is why it's a very risky business which the government cannot afford to get into. No government can afford to get into. This exploration needs to be incentivized. We need to create an ecosystem through enabling policies for it. Unfortunately, the legacy that we are carrying, 75 years of policy burden, even with the changes, have actually blocked private players' entry into exploration. And so what has happened actually because of this, in 75 years, at the end of 75 years, what we have with sitting over, shall I say, a gold mine or mineral resource as a whole, we are grossly underexplored. Our mineral wealth is totally underexploited. Only 1.2% of our GDP comes from mineral mining. You know, the major mining economies around the world, 5 to 6% of their GDP comes from mineral mining. And like I said, the data which is held by the GSI is not converted into commercial assets through exploration. Therefore, less than 10% of our total obvious geological potential area only has been subjected to detailed exploration. Now, as a fallout of this, conversion of geological resource into mineable reserves of India, we have an extremely poor, probably the poorest record in the world. And an indicator is we have 20 billion tons, 20 billion resource. But post exploration, what has been established is only 2.5 billion tons, just about 1/10 of it. That speaks and that explains the huge imbalance of our domestic production versus imports. Finally, gentlemen, you know, the miners have a very popular saying, the mineral industry people, that the meek shall inherit the earth, but not its mineral rights. Could you have thought of a better, point in time to say this than how it applies to our own case today? But there is a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way forward. We must be proactive, balanced, and we need effective policy approach, bold decision. And the gestation period is so short. If private players can be in defense industry, in space industry, even in India, why not in mineral exploration and monazite mining? This is a question we must ask ourselves. Why not? And as you have seen, no explorations go nowhere without private explorers. I will just elaborate it. Exploration, I have said, is too risky to scan government resources. The per square kilometer investment in Australia for exploration alone is $124. Canada is $118. India, it is as good as nil. It is just $9. Now, who will cover the gap? No government can do this. It has to be opened up for private, and it has to be incentivized and opened up for private investment. There are plenty of lessons. There is no secret. There are plenty of lessons. There are people prepared to join hands with us. All that we need to do is to learn lessons from advanced jurisdictions like Australia, Canada, and Ghana. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all that I have. I hope I put across, in a different perspective, where we stand as far as rare earth is concerned. And in general, we need to understand this in the backdrop of mineral industry as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan, for your comprehensive and insightful presentation on the subject. A note to all participants, questions to all the speakers and panelists will be taken up in the question and answer session after the panel discussion. Our next speaker for the day is Mr. Manoj Keval Ramani. Mr. Manoj Keval Ramani is a fellow, China Studies, and the chairperson of the Indo-Pacific Research Program at the Takshashila Institution. Mr. Manoj writes a weekly newsletter, Eye on China, that tracks developments in China from an Indian perspective, and a daily newsletter analyzing news coverage in the People's Daily. He is also the author of Smokeless War, China's Quest for Geopolitical Dominance, which discusses China's political, diplomatic, economic, and narrative responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. I now invite Mr. Manoj Keval Ramani to speak to us on the topic, India's REE challenge, competition, resilience, and opportunities. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nisha. I'd like to thank the Chennai Center for China Studies, the Institute of Contemporary Studies, the Press Institute of India for organizing all of this and putting all of this together. It's been fascinating to sit back and listen to all the presentations so far. It's been a learning experience, I must say. But I must also add that there's a challenge going so late in any round of presentations on a topic, and there's an advantage. The challenge is that a lot of what you want to say gets covered, and the advantage is also that a lot of what you want to say gets covered. So you actually, a lot of people have made the points that you want to make. So your challenge is to probably make them make them as interestingly as you can. I'm just going to share my presentation if it's possible. 1 second. 1 second. Right. So, oh, okay. So there's an issue with my presentation sharing. I'm going to try and see if I can just share it here. Just give me a second. The PDF is not being shared.
So if you like, one of us could share it from our end. If that
No, it's all right. I think I can share it through this mode. That should not be an issue. It's just a second, then I'm done. Okay. Done. Okay, I hope you can see this now. Right? I hope you can see it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so essentially what I wanted to talk about, and some of this has already been said, so I'm going to try and go very quickly through some of the bigger points that I wanted to make and then come to the recommendations as quickly as possible to try and stick to my time limit. I'm going to talk about the emerging policy environment. A lot of this has been said already, and India's opportunities and challenges, and then give out the recommendations. Essentially, this is how I see what's happening in the world right now. We've, and this is sort of pre-COVID, but COVID has accelerated some of these trends, right? We've seen the politicization of economic relations increasingly. Now, there's a sort of argument on all sides about who started this, but essentially the important point from an Indian perspective is that this is the reality of the world that we face today, where your international institutions and norms of governance are, if not breaking down, they're rapidly changing, and there's much more competition that's getting, that's the focus of economic relations today, and there's much more political competition. And that's going to be driving what we see going forward. So the rules-based architecture that we can talk about, we're sort of going to be less reliant on that going forward as states prioritize their own strategic interests far more rather than surrendering a certain amount of their sort of interest for the larger sort of cause of setting norms and governance standards. That's the first point that we need to keep in mind, and because that will essentially mobilize policy. There's a weaponizing of interdependence. This is happening across the board, and this has happened not just from a Chinese point of view, but also from others' point of view. And I mean, if I was to be absolutely value neutral, I would also see India's response to what's happened in Ladakh is essentially saying, look, we will also shift the game, we will also shift the dynamics to other domains of the relationship, because there are strategic and political objectives involved. Whereas the Chinese are arguing for the old model in that case, which suits them very well, of course. But this is happening across the board. The Chinese have done this for decades now, particularly since the mid-2000s, after they sort of acquired a certain degree of deeper gravitas and say in the international economic system. There's a resurgence of nationalism and populism across the world. We've seen this in the West, we've seen this in India, we've seen this in China, with Xi Jinping's rise and how that rise has taken place. And that again sort of fuels this idea of political logic, the political logic of your relationship being far more important than sort of economic arguments about comparative advantage and those sorts of things. And that's, I think, something that we need to be careful with, because this is also going to impact how your relationships develop with even trusted partners. Because, you know, in democracies particularly, we can see governments change and, you know, populism and nationalism can sort of turn policies. So again, this is a risk factor that needs to be kept in mind. There's intensified competition over emerging technologies. I don't need to go into this. This is, you know, critical. It's across the board, and this particular session sort of clarifies this point. And there's a key concern with regard to supply chain vulnerabilities, which have gotten much more amplified after COVID. It's not like they didn't exist before, but I think sort of the disruption that the pandemic caused has led people to think more about these things. So the nutshell point in all of this is that economic engagement in the future is likely to be far more subservient to the logic of politics and security. And that's what we are seeing. We're seeing more states talk about expanding the definition of national security. Some of the presentations that we've heard so far also have mentioned the fact that at one point in time, I think it was Professor Patel who mentioned that we can use national security as a factor in terms of how we make our decisions going forward with regard to rare earth elements. So it just tells you that while we can do that, yes, the others are also doing that. And it's an increasingly legitimate tool that's being used. And that's going to have an impact because, and why I'm mentioning this is that from a strategic perspective, all of us understand this, but this has an impact on businesses. And when we are talking about private businesses and private business engagement, these are the kind of risk factors that they will keep in mind when they come to invest in rare earth sectors in India or elsewhere. So governments need to therefore keep this in mind when we are framing policy, because anything that is done abruptly can disincentivize, can create sort of long-term disincentives for private sector to play a role, which sort of presages one of my conclusions and one of my recommendations is that we need greater private sector participation, as was just said in the presentation before mine. In terms of the sort of emerging policy environment with regard to the US, again, Professor Patel spoke about the executive order that Trump had signed declaring an emergency, and he had also spoken about investments in mining resources at that point of time. And that's one part of US policy. But under the Biden administration, what we've seen is that the imperative of security and supply chain, closing down supply chain vulnerabilities are colliding with the environmental imperatives. And increasingly, there's reportage about how the US is looking at partners abroad for resources, for raw materials, rather than tapping raw material resources internally. And that's something that's important to keep in mind from our point of view also, that as the future supply chain that will emerge will not necessarily be, for the lack of a better word, Atmanirbhar for any country, or at least the concept of Atmanirbharta has to be far more diversified. It has to be of a supply chain that is interlinked probably among trusted partners, much more so than has been in the past. And that's also the way the US is moving. So different states are trying to balance different trade-offs. And in the US, this is a important sort of trade-off with environment and security with regard to raw materials and raw material capacity. The other thing is that in saying that, the US is looking at processing capacity much more. There was a recent report talking about processing capacity with regard to EVs and building the EV sector in the US. And this is also linked to sort of high quality jobs. So that's the direction that the Biden administration seems to be going. After it sort of launched its, in February, it launched its supply chain review across different sectors, including rare earths. The third part is that they want to work on building resilience with allies. And I've already spoken about this, that you're trying to look at getting raw materials from abroad, which will probably mean greater investments. And again, it's something useful from our point of view also to keep in mind if we are looking to work with the US much more closely than we have in the sector. It's important to understand how they are shaping up, because those are also potentially assets that we can negotiate and work with on together. In terms of China, I think Dr. Mancheri gave a fantastic presentation, so I don't want to add too much to that. It was far more granular than what I'm doing here. But essentially, I want to talk about new regulations that were proposed earlier this year domestically, which talk about limiting foreign investment. This is anyway a state-dominated sector at central and local levels. So the objective right now is to further limit foreign investment, which is to sort of cut down on capacity, which is again to meet multiple different objectives. One of the objectives being environment and sustainability, because that is a key concern from a Chinese point of view. And when they're looking at their sort of environmental objectives down the road, it's an important political goal also for Xi Jinping. And he's made it an important political goal, given the sort of dynamics of domestic politics and populism in China. His adoption of so-called beautiful China as a strategic objective as part of his high quality growth agenda is indicative that this is something that they will continue to do. The other thing is that in order to support that, they're also trying to sort of crack down on illegal trading, illegal mining, unplanned production. So they're trying to sort of bring what has been a wild industry to heel. And so far what we've seen is that the central government has not necessarily succeeded in doing that. I think in a lot of our conversations about China, we tend to ignore the fact that there is a center and local government push and pull that goes out and that plays out in Chinese domestic politics. And that's important for us to keep in mind, because often what we've seen is that the actual amounts of extracted rare earth elements and processed elements and exports tend to exceed what may be reported in China, which tells you a little bit about the mismatch between center and local governments in China. And the politics of it is that there is an effort to try and crack down as much as possible at the central level on local sort of efforts in gaining revenues from these, and that's also reflected in anti-corruption campaigns and so on and so forth. Therefore, these new regulations that were proposed in January this year, their approach is to try and expand control of the central government across the entire industrial chain, and that's something that's going to play out in the future, and the effort is to try and control it. And the effort is therefore to cut down on raw material generation, but rather focus on processing capacity, move up the value chain in that sense. And already, like Dr. Mancheri has said, that a lot of the processing happens in China, and the effort is to try and expand that and therefore become a key node in the global value chain, but also most importantly satisfy domestic demand. Because this is again keenly linked to the central leadership's vision of China emerging as a manufacturing superpower in the future. So while all of us may assume that the path that China will take going forward is going from agriculture to a manufacturing powerhouse to now a service-driven economy, it's actually not necessarily what the plan is. The plan, if you look at the 14 5-year plan and the 2035 long-term plan, it's essentially looking at expanding manufacturing capacity and high-end manufacturing capacity based on sort of, driven by sort of new technologies and emerging technologies. And for all of that, you will need rare earth elements. And that's what they're trying to do. So even within the sector, they're trying to go up the value chain, and they're also hoping that that process will facilitate their manufacturing sector's upgradation, because that is how they see their future. They don't see their future as the United States as a financialized economy, but rather as something like Germany, which is a high-end manufacturing-driven economy. So that's some of the reasons. Now, I just wanted to share some graphics. I think all of us have spoken about this already, about output and production capacity. But this is an interesting chart which talks about Chinese exports and in terms of the value of those exports and what value is generated. And what we can see is that it's still the case that exports are declining, but there's been no significant change in terms of, even the value generation is declining from exports, but it's still not at where it was maybe 10 years ago. But it's heading in that direction, and imports. And 2018, China became an import destination. So this is the direction in which their industry is largely going, and I thought it's useful for us to know. In terms of what India's opportunities and challenges are, so I think the speaker before me spoke quite eloquently about what we are doing, and we import an overwhelming amount of our rare earth requirements from China, around 97% of them, the last I checked. Yet we aren't necessarily a large consumer of raw materials. We are a consumer of products that eventually comes down the road. So when we at Takshashila were thinking about how do we come up with a framework to try and understand what is critical products and where do we focus on, how do we sort of assess that, and why do we need a strategy to do all of this? What we essentially realized, and this is predominantly from a economic growth point of view, not from a sort of military national security perspective, this framework that I'm presenting here. Because if you were to put that framework, then your axis here, which talks about the importance of activity, would also take into account military uses. But we're looking at essentially, what is the likelihood of disruption in supply of certain commodities because of maybe the raw material supply being disrupted to us, or product supply being disrupted for us, or raw material supply being disrupted to other partners from whom we are importing maybe those products. And we looked at that and we came up with a list of different, different activities, products, sectors, which are far more important than the others, which tell us as to why it's important for us to focus on. And if you see on this axis, the importance of activity is defined from the point of view of what is the value added to India's GDP, rather than, the share in India's GDP, rather than just sort of from a national security point of view. And it tells us that, there's a significant component here. There's a significant component here where, likelihood of supply disruption might cause problems down the road. And this will even affect our exports. So it's really important from our point of view that we need a strategy to deal with rare earths. What are our opportunities? Again, I think the speaker before me spoke about monosites. We've got around 6.9 million tons of monosites, which is the 5th largest reserves in the world. Overall rare earth reserves. There's a tremendous number of monazite reserves. This chart here will show you exactly where a lot of this is located. It's important for us to start to exploit these. We've not exploited these as effectively, and the biggest challenge in doing that, like we said, was in terms of our policy architecture, but also in terms of the monopoly of IREL. We need to be able to look at private sector participation far more seriously. At present, IREL's remit is essentially limiting the kind of extraction and exploitation that we can carry out, and that's something that we need to keep in mind. So therefore, some sort of changes are needed. The big challenges along with this is obviously the fact that it's extremely expensive, and it can be extremely expensive, so it requires tremendous amount of investment, and that's upfront investment to be able to do some of these things. The environmental effects, again, these have been spoken about in some detail, so I won't go into that. But I think it's again important for us to address this rather than ignore it, particularly when it comes to exploitation of monazite beach sand. Bottlenecks in production. I've spoken about this. The government holds effective monopoly over beach sand minerals, which contain lighter rare earth elements. And that's a huge problem from my point of view. We need to start to break down that monopoly. And finally, global competition, right? We are lacking behind other suppliers, and that's a challenge from our point of view to be able to become much more competitive, which will essentially, at the end of the day, this will incur significant costs, and there's no guarantee of recovering costs. So when you're talking about private sector coming in and investing, so while I agree that governments cannot do all of it, and we need private sector participation, but when we are talking about private sector coming in and investing, how do we make it viable for private sector to invest? Because it's going to take time to be able to build that capacity. So we had a bit of a framework here again, where we looked at lighter rare earth elements, which have high commercial potential. And we thought that, okay, look, let's try and see if we can focus on these to begin with, at least in terms of our extraction objectives. And we sort of ranked them in different sort of points of view, in terms of how long it takes, what is the gestation period, what is also the time period that it takes to extract them, what is the availability in India, and the strategic potential of all of those. And I can share this with everybody to go through rather than going with this in detail. So that's broadly what our thinking has been about how India needs to approach the sector. And based on that, we had a couple of recommendations, and I'll just quickly go through this set. The first, and this was mentioned by one of the previous speakers about how different countries have strategic stockpiles. I think it's important for India to consider strategic stockpiles. Since we are not necessarily importing raw materials as much and processing them here at that level, we maybe need to think of stockpiles differently rather than just looking at raw materials. We need to be looking at stockpiles in collaboration with trusted partners, because there is, of course, a cost also involved with all of this. And if you don't have capacity for processing, it becomes even more problematic. So it's important for us to think of stockpiles in a far more diversified manner than we did in the past. This will require developing political trust with key partners, whether it is Japan, whether it is the United States, whether it is Australia or other states. So that's one sort of idea in terms of how we think about strategic reserves, rather than just thinking about something that we are stockpiling at home. We need private sector participation. This has to be a regulatory change, but it doesn't just have to happen at a regulatory level to start allowing companies and to reduce the monopoly of IREL, but it also needs to come from an economic point of view, where we are thinking of potentially a viability gap funding for private sector companies who may come to invest in this sector. Because at the end of the day, from a private sector organization point of view, gestation period matters, capital upfront matters, availability of capital matters, and therefore an incentive structure has to be thought about. And I think it's, I mean, we should, when we're looking at the Chinese incentive structure that we just discussed earlier, it's important to think of, how we also need to create an incentive structure. It need not be industrial policy, but it needs to be an incentive structure to sort of support private sector firms with viability funding for them to work through. I've already spoken about working with trusted partners, but again, we need to possibly also look at investment from different parts of the world. Investment from the Middle East can be extremely important, and if we can actually work with countries in the region to try and get capital investment in the Indian rare earth sector by firstly loosening the shackles in the sector, that could be useful. So we need to be a little bit more creative in terms of how we're approaching capital acquisition. In terms of the environmental damages and the environmental challenges, I think the first thing that needs to be done is that there needs to be far better communication with regard to the fears related to monazite extraction. From the way I understand it, these can be overblown. And therefore, it's really important to actually have science-based communication and effective communication with regard to the real threats and dangers and the challenges, rather than, letting rumors, letting anxieties, perpetuate, and therefore you end up clamping down on activities for political reasons. So I think that's another important thing in terms of how we communicate with local communities. At the same time, we need to involve local communities through initiatives of sustainability. I don't think we can do this by fiat like the Chinese have done it. We can't, and even if the Chinese have done it by fiat over the decades, they have now come to a point where politically it is challenging to keep doing this. And that's a reflection in the acknowledgement of environmental sustainability goals from the Chinese point of view also. So in an Indian point of view, it's anyway been extremely difficult to do this politically because of environmental concerns. So it's really important to actually work with local communities, offer viable alternatives, offer opportunities for resettlement if needed, and do that with far more diligence than we have. A lot of our ills need to be addressed domestically to be able to have an adequate strategy in dealing with the challenges of Chinese dominance of the sector. The last and the most important point again with that is, and it again goes to domestic regulation, is that we need to make sure that our pollution control boards exercise effective oversight. So a lot of these fixes are at home. And if we can do that well, we can actually start to sort of deal with the challenges of Chinese dominance. It's not just about expanding capacity at home or importing. It is also about changing the way we are approaching the sector in terms of overall governance. That's just what I wanted to share. I'm happy to hear people's thoughts after this.
Thank you, sir. You have certainly opened our eyes to some of the underlying issues and opportunities that impact India's potential in the global rare earth market. With that, we move on to our next distinguished speaker, Colonel R.N. Ghosh Dastidar. Colonel R.N. Ghosh Dastidar is a retired mechanized infantry officer with a vast and varied experience in the Indian Army for 38 years. He's a keen follower of geostrategic events around the globe and a freelance journalist in this field. We are honored to have you join us today, Colonel Ghosh. I now invite Colonel R.N. Ghosh Dastidar to make his presentation on how China became the dominant player in rare earth elements.
Thank you. Good morning, folks. Most of what I have wanted to say has been covered. And I'll also do my bit of value addition here. Rare earth is the new oil. Middle East has crude oil, but China has rare earth, is what Deng Xiaoping had said in 1992. In history, United States was the initial leader in producing and trading rare earth. United States discovered rare earth in mountain pass in California in 1949. Molybdenum Corporation of America started producing bastnasite in this particular mine. It initially designed for the separation of europium, which quickly became an important element in making color televisions. Molycorp, as what molybdenum is known as, also extracted lithium,
which is used in batteries, as has been earlier covered, cerium, neodymium for magnets, praseodymium, and scientists quickly began to discover new uses for these additional materials. Came in China, where in 1927, in Bayanobu in Inner Mongolia, rare earth deposits were discovered along with iron deposits. It contained bastnaesite and monazite. In 1960s, China also discovered bastnaesite in deposits in Shandong and in Sichuan. During the 1990s, its export grew rapidly, causing prices to plummet, a strategy that either put competing companies out of business or drove them out to greatly curtail operations. Bayanobu is the world's largest mine. It is estimated to hold 48 million tons of rare earth oxide with an average grade of 6%. It contains close to 1 million tons of niobium with an average grade of 0.13%. In 2005, it accounted for 47% of the total rare earth production of China and 45% that of the world. In 1990s, Chinese government declared rare earth as a protected and a strategic mineral. Since then, efforts have been there to increase centralized control, create a higher market value, build supply chains inside China, develop technical know-how, and to attract foreign companies using rare earth to manufacture final products inside China. And this process is still continuing. Foreign investors now can participate in rare earth smelting and separation only as a joint venture with Chinese firms. Foreign investors are prohibited in mining rare earth. Chinese government took major steps to support its nascent rare earth industries by issuing export tax rebates in mid-1980s. The tax rebates lowered the cost of Chinese mining companies, which allowed them to gain a foothold in the global market. Between 1985 and 95, the Chinese rare earth mining production exploded from 8,500 metric tons to roughly 48,000 metric tons. And its share of global mining output widened from 21.4% to 60.1%. As the Chinese mining capacity expanded, rare earth producers in other parts of the world began to shift their production to China to take advantage of their country's low cost in labor and weak environmental regulations. If you see a breakdown of the global rare earth exports between 2008 and 2019, China has a share of 46.3%, US about 5.4%, Malaysia 5.4%, Austria 5.0%, and Japan 12.4%. 25.5% is that with the rest of the world. We come to the magnet industry and how China usurped it. In supply chain, China sought to first capture the magnet industry, magnet market. Today, magnetic technology is perhaps one of the most important use of rare earth, both commercially and militarily. Permanent magnets that utilize rare earth not only provide greater magnetic power, but they also are much smaller in size. The samarium cobalt magnet and the neodymium iron boron magnet are both two leading magnets in the world. They are particularly useful for military applications such as missile-guided systems because of their thermostability. The various applications in defense of rare earth are in communication, electric motors, guidance control, targeting and weapons, and in electronic warfare technology. The story behind neodymium iron boron magnet reveals the Chinese modus operandi is that it is an important indication that China by design attempted to corner the market for rare earth. When these magnets were created, two companies, General Motors and Hitachi, acquired patents. General Motors patented the rapidly solidified magnets and Hitachi the sintered magnets. General Motors established Magnequench, a company to produce the magnets. In 1995, two Chinese groups joined hands with a US investment firm and attempted to acquire Magnequench. US government approved the acquisition after the Chinese agreed to keep the company in US for the next 5 years. The day the deadline of US government finished, the company shut down its US operations, employees were laid off, and the entire business was relocated to China. The deal was a strategic mistake on part of US because when the business left, so did the technology. In 1998, 90% of the world's magnet production was in United States, Europe, and Japan. Within a decade, the bulk of the magnet industry moved to China. Chinese producers have turned their attention to Japanese companies thereafter, which held the majority of the rare earth magnet patents. In 2014, China took Hitachi Metals to court in the United States, claiming that after its patent had expired, Hitachi was creating unfair market barriers. China has consistently attempted to monopolize the rare earth resources worldwide. It attempted to acquire Molycorp and the Mountain Pass mine. In 1978 onwards, the company was owned by Unocal, the Union Oil Company of California. In 2005, the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation submitted a bid of $18.5 billion to purchase Unocal. The Chinese company outbid Chevron by $500 million. The CNOOC, as the Chinese National Offshore Oil Corporation is known as, its bid raised a concern in the United States about energy security, and the deal didn't go through. And by default, US managed to save the rare earth resources of Mountain Pass too. In 2009, China tried to acquire 50% stake in Lynas Corporation, which is the owner of the Mount Weld mine in Western Australia, which is considered the richest deposit of rare earth outside China. China terminated its $505 billion bid after the Australia's Foreign Investment Review Board put down its foot and stated that China cannot hold majority stakes and should not have more than 25% representation in the governing board of the mine. China did manage, however, to acquire 25% stake in Arafura Resources, which owns the Nolan Bore mine in northern Australia, which is again a very major source. China has major mining rights in many of the Belt Road Initiative nations, which are rich in rare earth in South America, Africa, and in Central Asia. The ramifications of the relocation of production to China resulted in the United States giving up its leadership position. The erosion of technical expertise which accompanied this relocation is now the major impediment for most of the advanced nations who want to now break the Chinese hegemony. In 1990s, the Chinese strategy began to focus on rare earth. Mines in other countries couldn't compete with the low cost of Chinese mining and processing. Relocation of major companies to China under joint venture and transfer of technology aided China to indigenize production of permanent magnets, oxides, and alloys. In 2010, China cut its export quotas of rare earth exports and rare earth prices skyrocketed. However, here in 2010, once it did that, it was taken to the court by US, EU, and Japan. And in 2014, they got a ruling against them. The Chinese exports in 2019 to Japan, 36%, US 33.4%, Netherlands 9.6%, South Korea 5.4%, and Italy 3.5%. 5% in volume. The metals and alloys in EU depends upon 98.5%. This has already been covered. USA 95.2%, South Korea 90.9%, and Japan 48.5%. Here we must make a mention of Made in China 2025 policy, which the Chinese government has adopted, which aims to indigenize core components and materials to 40% by 2020, that is the last year, and by 70% in 2025. It also drives the green development, use of innovation, and emphasizing quality over quantity. The Chinese decision to diversify countries' energy mix by including vast amount of renewables has made rare earth a key ingredient in the success of their green energy applications. Rare earth as a leverage. Today, China's dominance in rare earth element supply chain presents one of the most strategic vulnerabilities of the world, akin to the global energy crisis of 1970s. China has demonstrated willingness to leverage its influence in the global rare earth industry in pursuit of its political objective. Use of rare earth as a political tool came in 2010 over a dispute over in Senkaku Islands with Japan. China restricted rare earth export to Japan for 2 months. It came as a rude shock to the whole world and a wake-up call. Amid the US trade tensions, China threatened to cut off exports of rare earth elements to US. It hiked the tariff from 10 to 25%, and in October 2020, it put Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing on the sanctions list. In 1999, Jiang Zemin had stated, improve the development and application of rare earth and change the resource advantage into economic superiority. And that is what they have achieved. The future. Mining of rare earth materials outside China has been ramped up significantly. China's share in global mining production has slipped from 97.7% in 2010 to 62.9% in 2019. However, its share of global earth reserves of the rare earth reserves has also fallen from 50% to 36.7%. But its status as the main supplier of oxides, metals, permanent magnets has not been similarly diminished. In the future, Chinese domestic consumption of rare earth, which is growing exponentially in defense, electrical vehicles, mobile, robotics, renewable energy technologies, will far outstrip its production, the demand from these. It has already become the world's largest importer in 2018. The global strategy to break the Chinese dominance. Advanced nations need to explore and exploit new resources of the rare earth energy ore. US, Japan, Germany, Australia are already funding new production sites. Space is the limit. Japan's Hayabusa 2, the space probe on an asteroid, Ryuga, which landed in December 2020 in Australia, brought back samples of Earth in search of it in space. Advanced nations need to establish midstream and low downstream production facilities. The world needs to find an alternative material to rare earth elements, and to tide over shortage needs to build reserves. Some interesting facts. Each Toyota Prius contains about 10 to 15 kg of lanthanum in its batteries. The F-35, it has already been covered, requires about 427 kgs of rare earth, and each Virginia-class nuclear submarine requires nearly 4.2 metric tons of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation that traced the history of the rare earth industry while also identifying China's strategic moves to emerge as the leading player in this field. I would also like to thank all the distinguished speakers for their presentations, which has significantly raised the bar for future research, policy making, and implementations with regards to India's potential and opportunities within the rare earths and heavy metal industry. With that, we now move on to our panel discussion, Maneuvering the Mineral Market, China's Rare Earths Monopoly. Before I hand over the session to our moderator for the day, Mr. Krishan Verma, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Verma and our distinguished panelists. Mr. Krishan Verma is a strategic affairs analyst and thinker. He is presently an emeritus faculty with the Rashtriya Raksha University, visiting fellow Chennai Center for China Studies, advisory council member, Global Counter-Terrorism Council, advisor, Usana's Foundation, and trustee, Foundation for Nonviolent Alternatives. Mr. Verma is on the board of directors of a corporate house and advisor to MNCs dealing with security, including energy security. We are privileged to have you as a distinguished chair and moderator for this panel discussion, sir. We also have the unique pleasure of listening and interacting with an illustrious panel of experts from Japan, Australia, Taiwan, and India. Our first panelist is Dr. Satoru Nagao. Dr. Satoru Nagao is a fellow non-resident at Hudson Institute based in Tokyo, Japan. He was formerly a visiting fellow at Hudson Institute based in Washington, D.C. He holds numerous research positions at prestigious universities and think tanks such as the Japan Forum for Strategic Studies, Institute for Future Engineering, Institute of National Security Studies Sri Lanka, Indian Military Review, Tilottama Foundation in India, among several others. He was also a security analyst at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a first lieutenant of the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Nagao. Our second panelist is Dr. Ashok Sharma. Dr. Sharma is a visiting fellow at the Strategic and Defense Studies Center, Coral Bell School of Asia-Pacific Affairs, the Australian National University. He is also a visiting fellow at the University of New South Wales at the Australian Defence Force Academy, adjunct associate professor at the Faculty of Business, Government and Law, the University of Canberra, and the deputy chair of the New Zealand Institute of International Affairs, Auckland branch. It is a privilege to have you with us, Dr. Sharma. Our next panelist is Dr. Florence W. Yang. Dr. Florence W. Yang is an assistant professor at the NCCU program in Japan Studies, College of International Affairs, National Cheng Chi University, Taiwan. She received her MA degree from Keio University and her PhD degree from the University of Denver. Her research interests include China's economic statecraft, Japanese security policy, the US-Japanese alliance, Sino-Japanese relations, and Chinese nationalism. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Yang, and we look forward to your presentation. Our fourth panelist is Mr. C. Balasubramaniam. Mr. Balasubramaniam Chandrasekhar is a senior research officer at the Chennai Center for China Studies. His area of interest include China's foreign policy, Chinese strategic thought, and Indo-Pacific affairs. As an ardent researcher, he has written on topics ranging from science and technology, geoeconomics, statecraft, and the South Asian region. Thank you for joining us in this panel, sir. Without any further delay, I would like to hand over the rest of the session to our moderator, Mr. Krishan Verma. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nisha. Thank you for the introduction for myself, as well as all my distinguished speakers who have agreed to participate in this panel. I could not have wished for a better galaxy of speakers which will follow me. And I must, as wearing a hat of the RRU and a part of the co-host of the organization which have been involved in this China Studies Forum, to actually record my comments on an excellent and brilliant session before this. I think each and every one of the speakers were absolutely outstanding, giving us a great insight into one of the most strategic areas. And as General Krishnan brought out, and I think it was also followed by Colonel Dastidar and the others, that we have probably not paid enough interest or taken enough time and resource to be able to look at the rare earth industry in the same way the Chinese have done. And he quoted Chiang Zemin, and that was a very telling adage that he used. Having said that, I think there is always time to catch up, since we are the 5th largest reserve holder of rare earths. We are very much, in terms of resources, we are very much there. It's just to be able to get things together. I'm not going to repeat anything that has already been said, because a lot of it has been done eloquently, with great clarity. And some of us who have joined us late could always access the recordings or ask us questions from the host. So I'm not going to go back into the whole fact about rare earths and what its use is and what is the implementation of this and who's doing what and what kind of exports are being done or what kind of economics is being played by this. And suffice it to say that the Chinese have made great strides in dominating this market. And with the kind of developments that have taken place, especially post-COVID, we've understood the salience of having our own resources, whether you put it under the umbrella of Atmanirbhar or you expand that Atmanirbharata, which was nicely and eloquently put on by Mr. Keval Ramani, to say let's spread that Atmanirbhar across allies, people who are democratic, who have no conflict of interest with each other, who are willing to work together in a complementarity, and to be able to then make a resilient global supply chain for very essential materials, which we are going to be manufacturing. And let's go straight from clean energy to electric vehicles. These are the future two technologies which we are looking for. So these are the kind of things that will go in, and I'm not going to say start recounting about how useful it is into the defense industry or sensors and propulsion systems and guidance. I think we all know that. So I'm not going to repeat all that, but I'm going to take, and especially for the sake of saving time, because we're running a bit late, and I want to go back into a question and answer session at the end of our panel discussions. Let me go straight into the meat of it and invite Dr. Nagao to make his presentation. Please do tell us about how you feel in the context of Indo-Pacific security and the economic security in the region. How do you see this whole game of the rare earth metals folding out, especially given the current dominance of China? Over to you, Dr. Nagao.
Thank you very much for asking this question. This is a very important and the core part of my explanation. Indeed, I'm not an expert of the economic security, so that's why I'm focusing on why we need to focus on the supply chain resilience. Now, why now? It's my main point. So this is a strategic explanation and the background of this issue. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, so from now I will use it. Can you see?
Yes,
can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Can you please make it full screen?
Yeah, this is PDF. So
yeah, you just have to close the side tabs. Just close the side tabs. It will Control L. Just give Control L. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Is this?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, title of my presentation is Supply Chain Resilience. Why now? Because the supply chain resilience is important always. But we're focusing on now. It's different. Why this issue is imminent? That's we need to think about it. Indeed, the supply chain resilience is important because the US-China competition. Now, US-China competition has been escalating because China has escalating their activities. Already, many presenters explained it, but I try to reorganize it. So for the world face fallout for the COVID-19 pandemic, China has undertaken the large number of aggressive military operations throughout the Indo-Pacific region. So this is what happened last 1 or 2 years. In the East China Sea, China has increased activity around the Senkaku Island of Japan to reach more than 1,000 times per year. In the Taiwan Strait, China has also increased its deployment. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Commander, Admiral Philip Davidson, warned that China could invade Taiwan within 6 years. In the South China Sea, China has ignored the 2016 verdict of the International Court and construct 7 artificial islands within 3 runways. So while claiming that these artificial islands have no military purpose, China is deploying missiles, the military planes on them. According to the Admiral Sunil Ramba, chief of the naval staff that time of the Indian Navy, Beijing has deployed 6 to 8 warships in the Indian Ocean. And the number of China's incursion in the India-China border area reached 663 times per year. And in 2020, in the Indian-China border, 12,000 Chinese troops entered Indian territory and clashed with Indian troops, causing the 20 Indian soldiers sacrifice their lives and 76 others were injured. Okay. So to counter China's escalating activities, the US has stepped up its deterrent effort. In December 2017, the US published its national security strategy, which will update, but by now this is the latest. And in 2018, the Vice President Mike Pence detailed the administration China policy at a speech at Hudson Institute. I was there and I took this picture, and both of which indicate a strong US stance toward China. In addition to imposing tariff on the ongoing trade war, the US has excluded Chinese product or 5G technologies from the government procurement in so-called high-tech war. And on March 25th of this year, US President Joe Biden remarked in his first press conference, China has overall goal, to become a leading country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch. So what kind of strategy will the US choose is the key point to understand why supply chain resilience is important. Simply said, militarily, the US has tried to maintain balance. But economically, US has tried to decouple from China and reduce China's budgetary advantages. And US has demanded that China respect Western value. US decided on the balancing strategy militarily because of China's pattern of expansion in the South China Sea in the recent decades. We should consider the recent history of the South China Sea. Japan's Ministry of Defense published a slide that shows why balancing strategy is the best option. This one. This slide shows that China's maritime expansion has been based on military balance. China occupied half of the Paracel Island just after France withdrew in the 1950s, and occupied another half of the Paracel Island 1 year after the US withdrew from South Vietnam in 1974. China occupied 6 features of the Spratly Island after the Soviet Union decreased its military presence in Vietnam in 1980s. And in 1995, China occupied Mischief Reef 3 years after US troops withdrew from the Philippines. Therefore, we must prioritize maintaining military balance with China. But economically, the US has tried to reduce China's budgetary advantages. China's problem is problem of money. When China has enough money, it can rapidly modernize its military and change military balance. China's wealth also allows it to invest a great deal of their money in small countries. The small countries in developedness allow China to expand its influence there. Countries with significant China's investment and development hesitate to criticize China, even if it does not follow international rules. That is the reason the US will focusing on the economy and value. Value is legitimating US strong policy toward China. Because China did not respect rule-based order, the US asked allies and partners to cooperate. One of the main reasons for China being able to keep the cost of production low is also due to human rights violations, especially in the Xinjiang region. Because China lacks transparency, the report of the origin of the COVID-19 will be discussed, and the US would naturally seek the legitimacy to put more pressure on China. Therefore, supply chain resilience is very important. Countries in the world need to integrate our economic effort and reduce their resilience, their reliance on China. Also, China is the first or second-rate trading partner for many countries, including Japan, India, and Australia. If these countries depend too heavily on trade with it, our economy will be like passenger of the sinking ship. Therefore, decoupling or risk diversifying of supply chains and markets are necessary. Indeed, Japan has already begun to do so. Because Japan has relocated its factory from China to Southeast Asia and South Asia, number of Japanese citizens living in China has decreased from 150,000 in 2012 to the 111 in 2020, 26%. And at the same time, the number of the Japanese living in the US has increased from 410,000 in 2012 to the 426,000 in 2020. So, and Japan earmarked 2.2 billion of its 2020 economic stimulus package to help local manufacturers shift production out of China. So when the first Quad Summit, which was held in March 2021, so this year, the 4 countries agreed to set up 3 working groups, including Group of providing COVID-19 vaccine to many countries in the Indo-Pacific, or critical and emerging technology working groups. This is related with the supply chain and related with rare earths, and working group on climate change. Indeed, this is also related with value, and value is related with the supply chain too, because China ignores the environmental issue to develop the rare earth mines. So supply chain of COVID-19 vaccine, the materials or critical technology are included as a topic. So the more China escalates the situation, the more the supply chain of American side country will be institutionalized in the Indo-Pacific. That's what's happening. That is why supply chain resilience is important. Thank you very much. That is my presentation, and I should stop share my presentation data.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nagawa. I think you brought out very eloquently the requirement for a very resilient supply chain and the kind of impediments that are coming in the way, and how aggressively China has been trying to dominate this region. May I, without further ado, just turn to the next speaker. I'm just going through this a little quicker so that we could save time and have enough time for a question and answers, and I would then summarize what we are saying. So let me just move on to the next speaker. We have Dr. Ashok Sharma, who will speak to us about geopolitics of rare earth material. May I just request Dr. Sharma to be mindful of the time, and if he could finish his presentation in about 10 minutes. We will have time later in the Q&A to be able to take on some topic which you might like to elaborate on. Over to you, Dr. Sharma.
So could you please unmute yourself, sir, Dr. Sharma?
Yeah. Now, am I audible?
You're audible. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me for this presentation. I'm delighted to be here, and I just went through two presentations. I went through how China has dominated the rare earth material technology, and almost 50% of the world is one side and 50% is with China in production. And very well presented the Japanese perspective on how you look at this. So a similar line, I would like, so we were in the denial mode. We were in the denial mode before COVID-19 and simmering geopolitics of everything was happening, but we were in denial mode. And suddenly we see this rare earth material has come up. No one would have imagined this kind of, this kind of pandemic or rare earth material or a stimulus package. And suddenly these things have come up. And we also see that latent geopolitical, equation, which was actually between, the hegemon and challenger, the way the United States is being challenged by China on every front is suddenly resurfaced. It has suddenly surfaced, and it was all latent. But one of the important aspects is that this renewable energy, the global climate change. These are all linked. We cannot separate rare earth material from the geopolitics. That's why it's happening, because there is a global concern about the global warming, and any move has to be acceptable. It has to, and that's how to address the energy security. And that energy security can be is obviously without energy security, a country can't progress. And the countries which wants to develop and which wants to continue to be a permanent, they all want to control this energy space. How during the World War II period, coal became important, and how England, UK dominated this space, how petroleum became, and how the US and other countries started to dominate this space, and aligning with the Middle Eastern countries, and how the Middle East became powerful. And for a while, nuclear energy has been also coming up, but the renewable energy amidst the global climate concern, and global warming concern has become this. Most of the countries have committed, good countries have committed for the global warming, bringing the mercury level down. And in that context, this renewable energy is the only way only solution. And the renewable energy, is not without the geopolitics. And the geopolitics is obviously for the rare earth material, which we all have been talking about this. From executive order of Biden administration to the Quad Summit, and then to the Global Climate Summit, we saw that renewable energy figured very prominent, and it is also prompting other countries to take action, and especially allies and friends, allies and partners like Japan, Australia, and all Western developed countries, and India is also chipping into, in how to manage this global supply chain. The geopolitics in the COVID-19 outbreak, during the COVID-19 outbreak, was visible at two fronts. One is the global supply chain, which all the speakers have mentioned, and that this is the space where we need to fix that. And the world, we're in denial mode, and by default let China dominate that, and it goes to Sino-US Shanghai Communique, and which Mike Pompeo during that at the Nixon famous Nixon Library speech after 30, 40 years, whatever it was that period, he mentioned about that we need to change China, otherwise China would change. So it's also the contest between authoritarianism and the Washington consensus. So it is on all fronts, but renewable energy has suddenly become the top priority of Biden administration, and all the countries are also looking into this aspects. So, but this is most visible in Indo-Pacific, and Quad needs to be mentioned here, and which my last presenter has mentioned, flags were shown. So how Quad can chip into this? This is very important, because this is the space. This is also linked with the Indo-Pacific strategy, where Quad has become an important Indo-Pacific strategy to counterbalance Chinese military move, where China is very well, China is not a match to Quad nations' military capability, obviously, but definitely on the global supply chain, on the economic front, and especially looking at Belt Road Initiative, is going ahead. Vaccine diplomacy was one of them, which, one of the issues which came, and they decided that Japan and America would manufacture, sponsor and capital and this, and India will manufacture and Australia would use its logistics for supply chain. But looking at the second wave of COVID, India has a bit gone down, and but all the countries are obviously chipping in. And from the Australian perspective, if you see that Australia has also, after executive order of Biden administration from President Biden, it is the debate has started about because Australia sits with the massive, reserves of rare earth material, and debate has started how to attract investment. 2019 policy was actually to attract investment and how to commercialize, how to mining, how to attract the so then again, are you inviting Chinese company or American or Indian? And so these things have to be discussed in the coming days. How you manage marketing, technology, and production of rare earth materials, which is very important for, especially looking at the renewable energy context, which is global warming is a concern, and these countries also, norms entrepreneur, they are upholder of liberal international order, and so America, countries like Japan and Australia and India is also chipping into a kind of, we have seen that House Solar Alliance between Modi and French President Macron was done, and that's a kind of, India is also chipping as a norms entrepreneur. So these things matter in the world geopolitics. It's not just a hard power, and it gives you a kind of soft power. So renewable energy, which country uses more renewable energy? And China is actually leading that. So these are also things where geopolitics, these are the issues also where geopolitics will eventually matter. It's not just hard power, but it's a soft power, and it's a global norms entrepreneurship of these countries are very well known. So this is Australia's concern that they should move more towards renewable energy. India has been moving; it has done very well with it. Adani, which was very defamed here in Australia, in fact has become one of the biggest player of renewable energy in the world. It's in top 10 in America. It is biggest solar park. It was I think in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. Now it is overtaken by China. So these are the moves where we see that rare earth material is becoming important. It's at initial stage, though research has been done on how China has come to dominate and what are the possibilities of these countries to come and chip in to do their bit to start thinking of fixing the global supply chain, because militarily China cannot fight these countries. Quad is a very, very strong bulwark against Chinese aggressive military posture or any move and China will not fight war. Trust me, it's China's strategy. If you look at the history, China, if you show them, if you deter them, China will not fight war. China wants to be a superpower, wants to dislodge the US primacy, wants to impose its authoritarianism in the world. It's a model of governance without fighting war, without contributing this. So this is a good move, and this should be extended to all non-traditional security issues, which is with the global supply chain, but renewable energy, cybersecurity, vaccine diplomacy pandemic has become one of the important aspects of global politics, and you never know what kind of, because 90 days inquiry has been ordered by Biden administration, and during the US election campaign, Trump was highlighting that it's a China virus, indicating that it was man-made, it was not natural, it didn't come from wheat market. So there's a possibility. Now President Biden has taken a U-turn and he's given 90 days inquiry to be submitted within 90 days. So it again shows that there is a possibility of biological warfare. So these countries need to come together, and there are already good moves. And Australia is also discussing about how Japan, America, and Australia can work together on this, because they are the leading on this front. Obviously, India will further chip in because of Quad but there is already strong strategic alliance triangular alliance between Japan, Australia, and America. So that would be also handy in this entire Indo-Pacific strategy, where the future is linked. If we ensure a secure and a stable Indo-Pacific, the prosperity in the 21st century it will be installed, and in which we all will prosper. Thank you very much for my. Thank you very much for listening, and this is what, and I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I must emphasize, I think we were carefully have chosen the participants for the panel discussion, and that's why we had views coming in from Japan and from an Australian perspective, a US perspective, as well as an Indian perspective. The whole idea was to see how we could look at Quad as some body, an entity which could work towards, if not breaking Chinese dominance, but at least loosening it up and ensuring that there are resilient supply chains for other countries in the world and who are not similarly placed as China is at this point of time, how we get together. So thank you very much for bringing out your points and the emphasis on the aspect of security in the Indo-Pacific region. I think we can't really talk about the security in the Indo-Pacific region without looking at Taiwan. I think it's one of the central places in the Indo-Pacific region which needs to be taken care of, if I'm using that with emphasis, because it's not a member of any of these entity, alliances or whatever you like to call it, or groupings. But it has a very important role to play, and I think it has a great insight into what's happening in the Chinese mainland in terms of resources, in terms of resource nationalism, in terms of watching their rare earths policy. They are quite affected because they are leaders in the semiconductor industry, which needs a lot of rare earth in terms of electric vehicles, etc. That they are absolutely avant-garde in. So I will, without further ado, move it to Dr. Florence Yang to give us a Taiwanese perspective. But also, may I request you, Dr. Yang, to give it a little more flavor as to what you think can be done, in terms of actually taking, of reducing the dominance of the Chinese, or taking something away from a practical aspect, something which could be implemented either by the Quad or by the Quad countries and the regions. And I'm specifically mentioning two, of Taiwan, of course, but also I want to bring in Vietnam, which is also an important player in the rare earth field, which we have not addressed since the morning. Also, if this is an open question to the next speakers, as well as when we go back to the Q&A, as to the role of the Russians in this, and Brazil in this, and how does BRICS, is BRICS something that we can do even though Chinese dominated? Is there something, a debate can be started? I'm just putting that out as a loose question. We can take it up in the Q&A. Over to you, Dr. Yang.
Okay, thank you, Chair, Dr. Walmart. First, I would like to thank the Chennai Center of China Studies for giving this opportunity to join this conference. I actually learned a lot from the older presenters. Okay, now I will post my PowerPoint. Today, I would like to talk about China's rare earth policy, and I think they have a tendency of a resource nationalism. So I will talk about the tendency for three sides from 3 points. First one is that they actually set up the export quotas, and that has been reduced since 2005. And in 2010, they even announced that they will reduce that by 40%. And then the second point is that they used to, before 2004, they used to have the VAT rebates because they want to encourage the local company to export rare earths to the foreign countries. But in 2005, they eliminate the VAT rebates and even increase the export tariff on the rare earths. So from 10% to 25%, and to various products related to rare earths. And the third point is that I go through their official documents and to see what kind of policy they have done. So in 2002, very early stage, they already have a document and trying to restrict those foreign investment in their local rare earth industry. And then they start to go through the controlling the mining and processing and export of rare earths. And most recent, actually from 2009, they trying to reorganize and also merge all the industry at home, so into 6 major rare earth groups. So we can see it's these 6 groups. and they located in the different places, and they have different kind of production, percentage of production. And all of this group, they participate in mining and concentration, separation and purification, and also refining. So this means the whole chain of the rare earths. And this is the map that showing that how many districts of the production of rare earths. So I think that this three tendency can show that is consistent with the definition of resource nationalism, which means a wide range of strategy that the government use to assert economic and political control over natural resources. In practice, resource nationalism include a wide range of approaches, like forbid foreign investment in their local mining business, and also rapid increasing tax, and also regulation on their local components, and also restriction on export of rare earths of the natural resources here. So yes, we just showed that they have a tendency of resource nationalism, but why should we be worried about this? I think one of the reasons is because they have been using this as an economic sanction tool against other country, which is the case of the 2010 case, and the target was Japan. And so I will spend a few minutes to talk about Japan's case and to see that is that anything that we can learn from Japan, because I think they did a good job to get through this whole crisis. So first, I would like to focus on this element, the dysprosium element. This element is highly used in the permanent magnet, and this kind of magnet can be used in the motors. And motors can be used in electronic car or air conditioner. But this kind of element is highly produced in China and heavily depending on China's export. So we can see the comparison here. In United States, mining sites, they actually create 0% of the dysprosium. And in Australia, it's 0.25%. But in Jiangxi area, it's 3.8%. This is the same amount of rare earths, and they have a comparison. So we can see that after the embargo against Japan, the price of the dysprosium actually rise very high here, although it gradually decline again. So how did Japan did, and what kind of response they have to get through this whole crisis? First, let's start a project, and they're trying to create certain new products that do not using any dysprosium at all, like electronic car makers like Mitsubishi or Toyota or Honda. They all trying to create this kind of motors so they can avoid using dysprosium and do not have to be controlled by the Chinese experts. And the second one is that they're trying to invest in other places that do have a rare earth supplies. The most successful one is the Australian one. Actually, the Japanese company, they have invest, and also the Japanese government, the JAGMEC, they also invest in this Australian mine site. And they also start a lot of projects, a lot of technology. They're trying to recycle rare earths from the used products. And they also send this case to WTO. And after 2 years, WTO actually confirmed that the whole China's restriction on the export of the rare earths was violation of the WTO agreement. So in 2015, actually China had to abolish export quotas and abolish the tax as well. So I think most of these measures are successful. And I think they're trying to do a really good job. So we can see the number here. In 2010, they have 82% of rare earths is from China. But in 2002, only 2 years, they decreased that into 58%. So which means that they decreased the dependence on China's exports. So what can we learn from this case? I think that first, I think the government had to take really strong initiatives in Japan's case, Japanese government, they actually, when they know that they have embargo and they are very alert about this, so they went to a lot of different countries and who have the rare earth reserve, and they try to contact those government and trying to have a joint project to deliver a lot of project there. It's like the case that we just talked about, the Australian case, that was a very successful one. And I think they also contact with India and Kazakhstan and Vietnam. And I think that's why I think that when this happens, whatever, we don't know what China will be targeting next time. But when that happened, I think the government had to really initiate to do something. And the second one is it's just my personal suggestion, and because I don't really work in the automobile industry, so I don't know is this a material suggestion or not. But I think that there are a lot of companies already create or have a new invention that is using do not use dysprosium at all, and to create motors or create a lot of products that do not use the dysprosium. So maybe there are possibility that we can share this kind of technologies with the like-minded partners. And also, when this kind of product came out, they might be more expensive because they spend a lot of money in trying to invent this kind of technology. Maybe the government can provide certain kind of subsidy for them. So even for the company itself or for the customer who buy this kind of products. So this is just my personal suggestions. Okay, I will stop here and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. Thank you very much for those insights. They're useful as to how we could go forward in trying to tackle this nationalism and dominance of the Chinese market. Let me now immediately move on to Bala for his presentation. He would be talking about China and the geopolitics of the rare earth material market. I will save my comments just after that and then go into the Q&A session. This is all for just saving time. I think we are exceeding. So let's over to you, Bala, if you could stay within the time limit. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm just moving on to my presentation. Nisha, please just give me a thumbs up once it is up.
It's visible, sir.
Thank you, Nisha. Before I begin, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to my director, Commodore R.S. Vasan, for giving me this opportunity, and the host organizations, Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, Press Institute of India, Rashtriya Raksha University, and the chair and moderator for this distinguished panel discussion, Shri Krishnan Verma, sir. So today I'm going to speak on the topic China and the geopolitics of rare earth dominance. Moving on to my first slide, the basis of my presentation is going to be answering 4 critical questions. The first would be, what is the actual threat that we are facing from China? And the second would be, how did China reach such dominant position in the rare earth mineral market? And the third would be, what is the Indian scenario and the way ahead policy options? And the fourth and final question would be, what are the way ahead for democracies like India and others in dealing with this China menace? So, as already brought out by previous distinguished speakers, the famous quote by Deng Xiaoping in 1992, where he said there is oil in the Middle East and there are rare earths in China. So quickly taking you to 2019, in the midst of the ongoing US-China trade war, what happened was the PRC General Secretary and Chinese President Xi Jinping, he paid a very much publicized visit to a rare earth mine in Jiangxi province. Coming in the midst of a US-China trade war, it is also highly symbolic because there was a message that China was trying to convey. So what was the message that Xi Jinping was trying to convey to the US? In strategic parlance, it has to be deciphered or interpreted as highlighting the leverage that China has over the US. To quickly illustrate, I would like to say in July 2020, China threatened to sanction the US dependence on China. And as already brought up by Colonel Ghosh Dasida sir also in his presentation, an F-35 stealth aircraft uses an average of 427 kgs of rare earth minerals, and a Virginia-class nuclear submarine, which is seen as a mainstay of the American power projection, uses around 4.2 tons of rare earth minerals. And all of these are coming from China. So what the Chinese were trying to say is that they let the Americans know who the real master is. So what does this all tend to show? It tends to show two things. What does it entail is, one, the strategic relevance of rare earth elements is far greater than their economic importance. And two, it also shows China's interest in this arena is not commercial alone, but also to use it as a tool of strategic arsenal that can be leveraged as necessary. Moving on to my next slide. So we have to answer this question: how did China attain this such dominant position in the rare earth market? So as there goes a proverb, Rome was not built in a day. China's dominance in this rare earth industry is a result of decades of targeted industrial policies, which it was trying to leapfrogging other nations. So the Chinese government took major steps to support this nascent rare earth industry. So initially what it did was it issued export tax rebates in the mid-1980s. And subsequently what happened was these rebates, they lowered the cost for Chinese mining companies, thereby helping them to gain a foothold in the global market. To illustrate this point, I would like to give you a small statistics. From 1985 to 1995, the China's rare earth mining production exploded from just 8,500 metric tons to roughly 48,000 metric tons. That is, China's share of global rare earth mining output surged from 21.4% to a whopping 60.1%. And subsequently, as China's mining capacity also expanded, the rare earth producers in other countries also began to shift their production base to China because they wanted to take advantage of China's low labor cost and weak or lax, I would say, environmental governance and regulations. So quickly coming to the period of 1990, what happened was the Chinese government declared rare earth to be a protected and strategic mineral. So what are the implications of these moves that was carefully crafted by China? One, this prohibited foreign firms from mining rare earth within China, and two, it restricted foreign participation in rare earth processing projects except in joint ventures with Chinese firms. So next question. So what is the strategic gain for China by this move? One is that it enabled the Chinese companies to gain foreign know-how through these partnerships while also steadily cutting out foreign competition from the supply chain. And two, quickly coming to 2012, what happened was, this is very significant 2012 because in June 2012, for the first time, China came out with its first ever white paper on the rare earth elements, which was titled as Situations and Policies of China's Rare Earth Industry. And what did the paper reveal? Three interesting developments. It delineated China's national rare earth industry, its capability and its strategy. And according to the white paper, it also revealed China possessed the capability to produce over 400 varieties of rare earth products in more than 1,000 specifications. This is important. This also means that China has developed a complete rare earth industrial production system, starting from the mining stage to the end product stage. That is, from the establishment of the upstream industries to the promotion of the downstream use industries. So China has already established. And how was the white paper received? It was not received well globally. It raised major concerns among countries across the globe by the time, because China controlled almost 97% of the world rare earth market and was a dominant player already. Sensing its importance, China in early 2012 also announced new restrictions on rare earth exports to the US and other countries. In response, just to give you a quick, in response, what happened was the US, Japan, and also the European Union moved a complaint at the WTO against China's restrictive export policies in rare earth elements. So moving on to my next slide, I'm going to give you a small scenario of Indian scenario on the policy options. India also understood the importance of rare earth, and one of the first countries immediately after independence to establish the National Indian Rare Earth Limited in 1950. However, despite having an early mover advantage, we could not capitalize on because apart from, there are no such prominent facilities in the private sector in India beyond what the Department of Atomic Energy and other of its ancillary units are doing. One issue for this is a lack of policy architecture, I would say, and there is a strong disconnect between the government, industry, and academia. One example that I would like to specifically mention here is in February 2020, the IREL invited bidders for preparation of a feasibility project to produce 2,500 tons of rare earth oxalates from the carbonanite ore in Amba Dongar in Gujarat. But the initial prior experiments showed that a good 3% yield of over 90% rich oxalates were brought out. But unfortunately, despite this being a non-radioactive material, there was a chance for the private sector to participate, but so far it has not displayed any kind of interest in this activity. Coming to the next one, the rare earth policy framework. A viable solution would be to encourage the Indian private sector to look overseas and secure the rare earth industries under prospecting or mining concessions. One thing why I think the private is also shying away from this rare earth is because you cannot make quick money out of this, because the gestation period is generally very long. I think that is also one reason why the private sector is trying to shy away from this. As a step in the right direction, what happened was a beginning was already made in 2019. 3 government PSUs, the NALCO, the National Aluminium Company Limited, the Hindustan Copper Limited HCL, and the Minerals Exploration Corporation Limited MECL, in 2019 established a joint venture named KABIL, Khanij Videsh India Limited, to explore, acquire, and refine strategic rare earth metals in countries like Latin America, Africa, and Australia. Next policy option for India would be extraction or recovery of rare earth element substances from discarded products, although it is very difficult and costly, but that shouldn't deter the private or the government to being considered for further serious research. Here too, the private sector can play a very significant role. Next point would be to development of plans for the recovery of rare earth from e-waste and coal fly ash. I think this should be very seriously considered. Right now, I don't have the exact numbers for this, because recovery from e-waste calls for efficient collection from all over the country. And also coal fly ash is already available at one place, but it is being utilized for other purposes. But still it is an important source, because coal ash, it doesn't require any expenditure on mining. And also a few statistics also says that we release about 200 tons of rare earth from every million tons of fly ash that is feasible. And the country also, India annually produces over 200 million tons of fly ash, but little work is being done in this area, and we also need traction here. And last point would be to identify new substitutes material for rare earth. This not only include the physical substances for rare earth, but also it can also look at developing new technological approaches that produce the desired outcome that can circumvent the need for scarce materials. Moving on to my last slide. What are the way ahead for democracies like India in dealing with China? In March 2021, the leaders of the 4 Quad countries like India, the US, Japan, and Australia held their first virtual summit, in which regional and global issues of shared interest was discussed. One significant component which was discussed was called emerging and critical technologies. This also includes, it brings into its ambit the rare earth element component. And this was also deliberated among the Quad grouping. And given China's willingness to use rare earth as a geopolitical weapon, source diversification has now become a strategic compulsion of sorts. And there is significant lessons that countries can learn from Japan. The JOGMEC, which is a Japan Oil, Gas and Metals National Corporation, and Sujitz, another company from Japan, they funded the Australian producer Lynas Rare Earth Limited at well below market rates to encourage the creation of an alternate non-Chinese supply chain. So this ensured that Japan gets a priority supply of its rare earth through 2038. So what was the results of all these actions by Japan? It has been very dramatic. From 98% of global mined production in 2010, China's market share had fallen to a drastic to 58% by 2020. Along with that, the Mount Weld and the Mountain Pass mine in the California, US alone now accounts for nearly 1/4, which is 25% of the global rare earth supply. And the last point would be to look at the Quad Plus One framework, or you can even call it extension of the Quad Plus, or anything that you would like to call. Quad nations should also work closely with countries like Vietnam, which possesses around 18% of the global rare earth reserves. Already by 2017, Vietnam was Japan's largest producer of rare earth. Just to conclude my presentation, we need to leverage what we actually try to leverage is the interdependency factors that are very inherent in the strategic networks to ensure that China's geopolitical tool in rare earth, finally one day it becomes just a paper tiger. Thank you very much for your patient listening, and available for any further questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you for a very insightful presentation. Again, I'm glad you brought in Vietnam also in the piece. I had mentioned this earlier. I think right through the entire session since the morning, starting from the inaugural address to the keynote address, to all the speakers' presentations, and now the panel discussion, I think we've actually run through the entire gamut in a most exhaustive and comprehensive manner, looking at the entire problem of rare earth material from a strategic point of view, from an economic point of view, from every dimension that you can think of in terms of clean energies, in terms of environmental degradation to be prevented, etc. Let me just, before I move on to the Q&A, just a small comment. You know, it's a little matter of concern that we knew that the Chinese are working on this from 1985, 1995. There's huge amounts of investment. The world really didn't notice. We were all sort of, whether we were cooperative or whether we were integrating globally or whatever it was, till the root shock of 2010 woke us up. But then again, for 8 years, of course, there's been a great emphasis on moving away production, and you've actually taken away the global market share from the Chinese from 97% to the 60s, whatever percent it was, 64, 65. But it then came to 2018 before Vice President Mike Pence again mentioned and emphasized the idea about rare earth. And then in 2020, it's got a renewed emphasis. I hope we will take this seriously and then move on and make sure that whatever we do, I think the most important thing, I think we have the answers. It was given by many people. The options have been given. I think it's the matter really rests in implementation, and hope some implementation will be done of all the policies that come. Now, without further taking your time, let's move straight into the Q&A session. Nisha, is there anything there?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. For all the participants, kindly note, questions that are posted in the chat box will be taken up, and participants are encouraged to post relevant questions to specific speakers. Please note that no oral questions will be taken up. Thank you. With that, we'll go to the first question. The first question is from Commodore R.S. Vasan, the director of C3S. He asked to Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan. General Krishnan again has, by way of this talk, highlighted the failure of the entire system in India despite availability of raw materials. What is preventing the government from doing what it must, as all the factors are known to the policymakers?
Thank you very much for that question. Actually, that question cuts through the entire haze and comes to the specific issue from the Indian perspective. Let me just take a couple of minutes to elaborate something. All this exercise that we are doing is to finally come to the point of India, and India has a tremendous advantage. The first advantage is really very few people know that we have monocytes stored, thousands of tons of monocytes stored in concrete tanks, because prior to 2016 and 2019 or so, for about 20 years, beach sand mining was permitted. Now, beach sand consists of heavy minerals like, sillimanite, ilmenite, garnet, and all. And rest of as per the regulations, rest of it, the tailings, were to be stored. Why? Because the tailings contained rare earths and thorium. So there were very strict specifications for storage of that. That entire quantity is held. It is the government of India's property, but it has been held by miners who were given permission then. So this quantity running into thousands of tons is held by us, held in tanks. And what does it contain? It is monazite containing rare earths and thorium. So that is if somebody has to do a mining purely for rare earth, you can never beat China because of the cost effect. It can only be economical if it is integrated mines. Even China's in most of the places, it is combined with iron ore. It's a tailing which come from iron ore. So this particular stock which you are holding, as it's a mine, gold mine on which you are sitting, not using. You're looking all around the world without using this. Now, this has the potential, believe me, I'm not exaggerating, to be converted into rare earth permanent magnet in a matter of just 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years, that is the time. And this technology is no secret technology. Countries, firms in Japan, firms in Australia are prepared to join up with you. But now coming to the question specifically of Commodore Watson, what is it that's stopping us? The only thing that is stopping us is the policy that beach sand mineral as on today is no-go. Only people who can do the mining are the Indian Rare Earth Limited, who I must say their production for whatever reasons is not even insignificant. So we are sitting over it. Now, why is that the policy of banning beach sand minerals? I suppose the fear is of thorium would be illegally mined and things like that. Now, we cannot stop, close down a national highway of world class, saying that at some stretches there are some robbers. We need to remove those robbers and use the highway. We have done, just the opposite. We have said, no, that's a no-go. So all that is required is a policy decision. Now, what could be preventing this policy decision? One is the fear of dealing with thorium. The other is political reasons, which I think is very sad. And the third is the environmental issue. Now, environmental issue for monazite mining is the easiest to solve. It does not create scars the way we find elsewhere. The politics, I do not know what can be done about it, but we can get around the local people, take them into confidence and get over it. So the bottom line is, it is only the policy, and what stops it is probably our hesitation about dealing with thorium, which is surmountable easily. Second is environmental issue, fears, again easily surmountable. Third is politics. I do not know what can be done about that. I hope I have answered the question.
Thank you, General Krishnan. You did very eloquently, I think. Yeah. Yes, Nisha.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is from Mr. Rishi Athreya, and I'll point that question to Mr. Manoj Kewal Ramani. It's taking from Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan's question. He asks, assuming India is REE resource rich, how long would it last if this were to be exploited? What are the environmental challenges?
Right. So we are obviously RE rich, which General Krishnan has just said. In terms of how long will it last, I mean, it depends on how you mine and what you do with it. So I don't think that's really our concern. I think our concern in terms of the environment is that, look, when you do, particularly on monazite, I think General Krishnan has already said that, it's not really a huge environmental hazard in that sense that we think of it. But the challenge essentially, environmental point of view, is that when you process these metals, you end up creating a lot of toxic waste and wastewater, which can pollute your groundwater and that sort of things. And in China, we can see that's happened a lot, and that's created sort of downstream political effects. In India, the challenge will be exactly the same. I mean, given the fact that water is a huge political issue in India also, not just from the point of view of survival, but also, like I said, politically, it's a hugely divisive issue. Our sort of groundwater tables are already not the best in terms of the levels; they're shrinking. So it will be politically challenging from that point of view to do some of these things. In terms of the environmental damage, that is the environmental damage that you will create. You will pollute the entire environment around you. You will pollute the water table, and that will have a huge impact on people's livelihoods, particularly in those areas also, apart from whatever the impact will be on their health. So that's the entire gamut. How do you limit it? It's really difficult. It's really challenging. It's cost intensive. But that is what we will have to do if we have to sort of take this process forward. The most important thing is to actually even communicate, particularly on monazites, and I'm making this point again, is to communicate that is not the environmental damage, and that is not a huge problem. So we should not actually be worried about that. And that is something that we have in abundance, and we should be using and we should be tapping.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Colonel Hari Haran, and it's again to Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan. He says, thank you for that penetrating analysis of mining maladies. What should be our priorities to get out of the gridlock in the mining industry? Please enlighten us.
See, the mining of from monazite resources for rare earths, I think I made a passing mention. If you recollect, the British government is setting up a rare earth permanent magnet facility in conjunction with one of the London firms called LCM London. If I'm not wrong, LCM London's controlling stakes are held by an Indian company. You may like to probe into it. And the actual story behind that is they had invested in India, anticipating permission for mineral, beach sand mining and monazite mining, but the permission never came through. So they had to shift their focus and base into London. That is what has been done. So truly speaking, the the monazite mining is not a problem really at all. Beyond that, you need a lot of exploration to be done. If you remember, that I had taken a little off the track to explain how weak, or you can say almost zero, is the exploration in India. So when it comes to mineral mining, the know-how exists. People invest. People who are prepared to invest technology, invest money. Everything exists. Like it was brought out by Mr. Manoj also, the environmental issues are probably comparatively much lesser, easily surmountable. In fact, most of these mineral, the monazite sands, minerals which are mined, after mining, the remaining tailings are put back, and a lot of greenery. There are very nicely laid out plans to to reduce the environmental impact to the barest minimum. So truly speaking, the bottom line is, the only thing that stands between India and the rare earth is the policy. Let me just add something here. It may not be proper for us to just look at rare earth. Rare earth, if you have a rare earth downstream, if you can attract, if you produce rare earth, we will attract downstream industries. Now, downstream industries worth billions of dollars will come with technology, with the capital that is required. There will be so much of employment generated. It's a whole series of windows that are going to open. So it is not just the rare earth. It is actually looking at unshackling India's economy. And as I touched upon during my talk, there is so much which is dependent as we look at not the far future, just 20 to 30 years from now. Green technology or the efficient modern high tech, they all require rare earth. Now, if you are dependent on China, like I said, we have learned from API monopoly, we have learned from the problem of even for Covishield, the rare earth, the raw material. We should learn our lesson. The warnings are loud and clear. Thank you.
So, thank you, Nisha. Can I just intervene for a second, using the prerogative of being the chair? I just two very quick questions to ask, and I think Manoj, you could take it, General Krishna, or anybody else could take it. There were references to two very important things that were. One was that exploration is an extremely costly affair, and the hit rate in that is negligible. And there was another view that government can't spend too much of money on something which will not produce results, but private investment should be encouraged. I see a contradiction here. Why would private investment put money of their own in something which has got a 1:100 hit rate if the government can't do it? So and I remember reading something which Manoj had put out some time ago, I think it was last year, which mentioned something about a new department being brought out, and you reduce the importance of the Indian Rare Earths Limited and have a department of rare earths under the petroleum and natural gas ministry or something on that sort. Would you like to elaborate on that as to how I'm looking at how do we implement what we are talking about? I think we know what the problems are. We have the policies. We know the importance of those policies. How do we actually, if in a position of advising government, say how is this going to be implemented? Where's the money coming from? And another added question to this, which any of you can answer, including the people from Japan and Taiwan, is that recently in the Quad Summit, there was a talk about bringing in money from other developed countries towards making vaccines. $200 billion or something of that sort was made. Can we do something? Can we look at something like this amongst Quad countries and other countries which use rare earths to have a global development fund and then give it to some countries like India who have the reserve, Vietnam, etc.? Is that a possibility, or is it in the realm of doability? Thank you.
Since I had touched on that exploration, should I take it on first? Okay. Okay. Exploration world over is like a technology startup. What exploration is to mining in general, not confined to rare earth. is like a tech startup to the IT industry. You will agree, you know, a lot of people say that the Indian IT industry flourished because of one single reason, that no one knew what was in store. So the regulations could never catch up to, you know, hold them back. Therefore, they sprouted and flourished. You know, that is what the miners in particular say. So the exploration, the success rate of exploration is on an average 1:100. If you explore at 100 places, you may strike literally gold, you know, whatever, in one place. So and I also explained, if you recollect, the per square kilometer investment on exploration for countries like Australia, Canada are about $124 and $119, whereas in our case, it is $9. You know, the scant resources of the government can never be, because there will be a lot of questions. Let's say, whereas those 99 places where you have just wasted money, who's going to account for it? Whereas, you know, the private explorers have a system of raising public fund from the equity market, like the startups do. So the person who is investing in the stock market is taking a chance. If it succeeds, yes, it may be 100 times fold. If it doesn't, then it just falls off. That is why exploration is one thing world over. It is not peculiar to India. It is a private, you know, it's an absolute gamble, and it is like an adventure game into it. All that the policies are required to do is to frame policies so that, you know, once they explore, these explorers do not do mining. They are looking for after all, it's the public, it's the government property, the national property. When it is being when somebody is being given permission or a lease for mining, once it is confirmed that this particular patch of, let's say, 10 square kilometers contains 50 billion worth of gold, or whatever you say, when the lease is being granted or the mining permission is being given, the explorer is adequately compensated. We need to have a policy like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. What about you, Manoj? Would you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what General Krishna is saying. I mean, from my point of view, there's also one of the other reasons why governments are not suited to do something like this, particularly when the risk is so high and the reward is so uncertain, is that it will lead to bureaucratic inertia. You will end up in a position where, you know, and I think we saw this with regard to how we approached our vaccine procurement. We did not make bets into the future, which, say, the United States did. You know, we did not want to do that because bureaucratically it's extremely risky to take such decisions. At the end of the day, what you're going to end up having is a CAG report and corruption charges about money being wasted and the politicization, which will end up, you know, sending you back 10 years than where you had hoped you would be. So I think that's really a challenge from that point of view also. Apart from what General Krishna said, I agree with that. On the department, I think how we'd approached it was this, that we looked at the role of IREL and we realized that, look, at the end of the day, IREL essentially enjoys a monopoly in terms of extraction. And also, when you look at its remit is primarily appears to be, you know, production of raw materials such as thorium and uranium for India's nuclear energy program. It's not really looking at other elements, you know, and that's the real challenge. And because it's a monopoly, you're ending up in a position of not using exactly what you have, you know, and the other resources that you may have. So the extraction of RE in India is therefore stuck because of that. So what we had therefore proposed was that, you know, instead of having everything under IREL, we sort of do some sort of a bureaucratic shakeup. You create a department of rare earths under the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas with members from the Ministry of Coal involved in their expertise in terms of exploration and mining. And you sort of try to give that department authority to oversee the formulation of policy and focus on attracting investment and promoting R&D instead of actually doing the extraction and, you know, doing the exploration. You give them the opportunity to actually just frame the policy and attract investment. We also talked about the creation of an autonomous regulator. We called it the Rare Earth Regulatory Authority of India, RRAI, and this would sort of then resolve disputes. So the government sort of steps back from being an active player in the sector to being a regulator and being the policy setter as opposed to, you know, actually doing that job. And to be able to do that, the reason that we specifically propose that we need to make this change is because again, when you look at it from a bureaucratic actor model, you have an entrenched system with entrenched bureaucracy, and if you need to shake that up, you need to make some of these changes. So that's essentially the idea that we had. And we said, look, essentially IRL can continue, but it should be shifted from the Department of Atomic Energy to the DRE under that remit. And the DEA could be involved in the DRE's activities as far as certain radioactive materials and their byproducts are concerned, but no further. So you divide things so that you can actually leverage the resources that you have.
Right. Thank you. And
I think, can I just take a minute? I think the chair had also mentioned about the funding part, the capital
yes,
part.
Question I was coming to. Could our friends from Japan, Australia, Taiwan, as well as
Can I just take a half a minute before that? Please. Friends in the Indian mineral industry, mining industry, tell me that for rare earth, the capital is not a problem, technology is not a problem. All that problem is the moment you facilitate through the regulations, the policy on it, people are waiting in the wings, especially from Australia, Japan, and the EU with funds, including Indians with funds. So as per them, that is not a inhibiting factor at all. Thank you.
Thank you, General. That was a very useful input. Would you like to say anything, Dr. Nagao or Dr. Torrance or Dr. Sharma, about your country that you are resident in? Do you have a view of what they would be thinking of in this?
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, this is good idea. If Quad prepare the money and the mine of the rare earth and deliver the vouch, these resources, that's a very good idea. But view from Japan, when the country in the world needs money, every time they look to us. So Japan want to say we are not automatic teller machine, but indeed Japan is automatic teller machine. So that is a little ironic situation. Maybe many countries love Japan because we are automatic teller machine. But anyway, Quad Summit will happen in September, and we'll talk about this idea, I think. So your idea is very good, and we will proceed it if Japan prepared enough money. That's my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Nagao. Anything, Dr. Sharma? Would you like to say something from the Australian perspective? I think you have to unmute.
I really listening to our fellow speakers, Krishnan and Manoj. It's really very, you guys have got a very insightful and expert view. And I just had finished recently. My book came on India's pursuit of energy security, where I talk about this geopolitics of renewable energy. Energy security will eventually lead to renewable energy geopolitics, and that I'm talking about this. And so I went through all these national energy policy of India, and then. So what I realize is that whether it's energy, petroleum, or gas, or everything, is at the end of the day is investment. What our Japanese fellow is saying, that how to attract investment in this new sector is obviously a gamble. It can be a jackpot. At the same time, you can put all the money in. It's a sinkhole. So but when it comes from Australian perspective, I would like to just Australia's 2019 mineral, rare earth material strategy is very much focused on, because they want to, make Australia, because everyone talks about that Australia has got abundant resources, abundant mineral resources, and Australia's, boom has been up because of export. It is one of the biggest, export sectors. In fact, the top export sectors, followed by education and tourism and all that. So now they have come out with this strategy in which they have totally focused on 3 areas: is promoting investment in Australia's critical mineral sector and downstream processing. Second is providing incentive for innovation to lower costs and increase competitiveness, and connecting critical minerals for the infrastructure development. And all this all these 3 things are being focused. And I think that should be the strategy of, all the coordinations, including that this is what it is. And all the coordinations could be, come together. And as I've been listening to Vietnam, definitely Vietnam is one of the, middle powers, I would say, that countries which has not only contained COVID-19. It's densely populated, unlike Australia or New Zealand and many other countries. It is densely populated, but it is also showing, guts. It's exploring energy with India. So these are the countries which needs to be included, and Indo-Pacific. And also, I will again bring it to the geopolitics. So what about the European powers? They're also concerned about this containing of China. Even Russia is concerned about this. Russia, on the one hand, it challenges America on many fronts, but on the other hand, it wants to be a friend of America and the West, and because it has, major stakes of, its gas market. So it is also concerned about the Indo-Pacific studies. Can we reverse Henry Kissinger's policy of, bringing Soviet Union by helping China? So can we reverse that Sino-US Shanghai Communique so can Russia be included also? Germany is already there, France is already there, and UK has also come with the Indo-Pacific strategy. So I would say that we need to include more and more nations when it comes to the investment perspective aspects, and obviously the technology and everything. We all know that these countries are developed, and they will.
Maybe this could go into the Alliance of Democracy or something in the.
Yeah, something. Great. Thank you.
Florence, would you like to say something? Do you think Taiwan would be interested in putting some funds towards a global, reserve or something to do this?
I just want to make a quick comment to your question of the vaccine corporations. As a receiver country, Taiwan received vaccines from Japan and from United States and some European countries, and we are very grateful for that. So now we are starting producing our national vaccines. So maybe if we can get certain kind of international recognition in the future, maybe, although I cannot speak on behalf of our country, but I think if we can get recognition and other countries think that they need help and want to receive this kind of a thing, I think we will be happy to share that with all the people. So we are very willing to join this kind of a cooperation framework. And I think that if that's possible, I think that more cooperation is definitely very welcome in Taiwan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yeah. Sorry, Nisha, back to you. There are more questions in the box. I think we're running a little.
Yes, sir. In the interest of time, this will be our final question. And it's from Mr. Pratap Heblika. And I keep it open to any of the speakers who want to answer it. We've restricted to 2 speakers. He asked, in India, state governments and union territories need to be integrated into the overall scheme of things. This has not happened. Is there a way forward?
Yeah, I think if I can just sort of quickly intervene on that. Look, this is, I think, really, really challenging, and I think this is where some of our essential problems lie in terms of how we handle things at home. I think that domestic politics. Look, at the end of the day, it's like this. For every actor, whether it's a state government, whether it's a private entity, there are a set of incentives that will eventually drive them. Even for political actors at state government level, if there is clarity in terms of policy and an enabling environment, state governments will do what they have to do. Because at the end of the day, state governments also, at the end of the day, after 5 years, go and see a legitimate mandate. So I don't think we need to sort of necessarily think about it from, and again, the Chinese sort of example comes to mind. A lot of us in India tend to look at the Chinese example and say, because it's a unitary system, it's able to drive action. I don't think we need to sort of think of that example as something that we need to emulate, because that example in itself leads to tremendous inefficiencies. So I don't think we need to think of that. I think what we need to do is we need to, at a central level, just create the enabling policy environment where government steps back, opens up the sector for private entities and others to sort of participate. It regulates effectively. So that's the job that it has to do, regulating in terms of competition, in terms of pollution and externalities. And if that it does well, the sector will grow. I think that's broadly the point that I would like to make.
Thank you. Yeah, Nisha?
Yes, sir.
Are we done with the question and answers?
Yes, sir. With that, we have come to the end of the question and answer session. We thank all the distinguished speakers and panelists for patiently answering all the questions. It is now my privilege to introduce Commodore R.S. Vasan, who will deliver the concluding address. Commodore R.S. Vasan is currently the Director of the Chennai Center for China Studies and Regional Director, National Maritime Foundation, Tamil Nadu Chapter. He is also head, Strategy and Security Studies, Center for Asia Studies. He has had a distinguished service of over 34 years in the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard. His additional current assignments include member advisory group at the Madras University and Stella Maris College, visiting faculty at the Indian Maritime University, among others. He has over 100 papers published in edited volumes, journals, and international publications, and he is a regular speaker at many international and national institutions around the world. We look forward to your valuable perspectives in conclusion of this conference, sir. I now invite Commodore R.S. Vasan to deliver the concluding address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nisha. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. And I think this is one of the most fascinating events that we have conducted in the recent past. And the credit entirely goes to all the organizers who are here, the ICSB, PII, RRU, and of course the Chennai Center for China Studies. And it took some time for us to put this together. Multiple meetings, coordination, identifying the right kind of people. And I'm so happy that we got the best people in the business, including from Taiwan, Australia, and Japan. No, there are many points that I have noted, but obviously due to constraints of time, I only said I'll dwell on some of the deliverables, which has also been highlighted by speakers and the panelists. First of all, what came out clearly is that China had understood the game long before anybody else. As it was brought out in the 90s itself, they knew what they need to do to have monopoly of the rare earths. So they worked towards it. They allowed liberal policies for mining. They did not worry about what happened to the people who were involved in this, which is what they did also in the case of cheap labor. So with that, they took a lead. And today they are in a position to control the rest of the world. So we have realized again rather too late. And, which is why everybody is now worried about, where are we and what can we do? So this is where there is an importance of the discussions today. What came out clearly is that Quad perhaps holds certain amount of answers. The Resilient Supply Chain Initiative, which is part of the Quad, as was also brought out, has got an agenda in September. And they need to be able to look at what kind of funding is required. This point came out, and I know there were many resource persons who said that they require some kind of a corpus. Parallelly, all the other partners are working. I think Major General Krishnan, Lieutenant General Krishnan made a valid point and said, all these people are way ahead. Where is India? So obviously, we are still rudderless in terms of engaging with the people who are already doing business, whether it's in EU or US or London, wherever it is. And so this is where it. So another important point he made was about the investment in getting the rare earth from either space, outer space, or from the deep oceans. Remember, more than 25, 30 years ago, we were given a pioneer status, and we are able to drill at about 6,000 meters, which is where we expected these elements to be available. The point is that we've not gone beyond because it's still not cost effective to mine from those depths at 6 kilometers or 7 kilometers. Again, China has taken a lead over here, and they have the world record today of going down to those depths for trapping those minerals. Other thing is, of course, on the point that was brought out by 2 or 3 speakers about the dependence even for advanced weaponry, whether it's the F-35 or the Virginia class, which is dependent on these rare earths which are required for their critical systems, sensors, weapon delivery, including AI. But when you look at the quantity which is there in the Virginia class, it's about 7,300 tons. And the quantity that we are talking about is 4.2 tons. So in comparative terms, it may be less. But in terms of utility, it is the most critical aspect of a war machine, whether it's the F-35 or the Virginia class submarine. So, as long as this kind of a dependence is there in advanced electronic systems, weapon systems, sensors, you find that your dependence on China is a big question mark. So the other point was, more relevant to India, because that is where we come in terms of identifying what is required to be done by India. Many suggestions have been given, and I'll only flag a few. And this is related to something to do with our policy paralysis scenario that we are constantly in. We know what to do, we don't do it. We exactly know how much of monazite is available, but we would be rather happy sitting on top of it than allowing the industry to tap this potential which is there. So, the other important thing, is on the point that was brought out by, I think, Manoj about community interaction, taking the community on board. You can't do these things in isolation that like you can do in China. There you can float all kind of environmental laws, and you will not have a protest. And if there are any protests in the state, that will be subdued. And therefore, how do we get this community on our side? You saw it happening in Kudamkulam when we had the protest by the fishermen when we were trying to have nuclear reactors there. So this is a complicated situation. Other points which came out are very clearly about not having total dependence only on rare earths. Also trying to look at alternate technologies which are important for the clean earth. There are commitments on the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. But these cannot be achieved unless you have total control about how much of rare earths are you using, what alternates are available. I think the other point that came out also in renewable energy was about even in solar energy, you're still dependent on rare earths. The wind turbines themselves have critical components which are required for conversion of solar energy. So that is the scene we are in. So there's a lot more that I have written down in respect of deliverables that were given by each speaker, but I will not be able to delve on them, but we'll make a summary of this and share it with all the participants. Now, having spoken about all the other speakers, I just want to go back to the first speaker, the Vice Chancellor of RRU, Dr. Professor Bhimal Patel. He said, there's everything that's available. We can do it. We can. So, only question is, since he said we can, why is that we can't was the question that came in many of our minds. And this is what was evident in the chat box when we saw that, if we can, why are we not doing it? So unless we are able to address this issue of if you know what we can do, and if you are still not able to do, why is it that we are in this state? That explains why India was a notable absentee in this list of initiatives, whether it's the RSCI or whether it is the Quad or wherever. We've been a hesitant partner. We need to overcome these hesitations of history as we keep repeating. So even in the Quad, it's only thanks to the trans-Himalayan aggression that there's a little more traction in all the partners trying to forge an alliance, which will also provide multiple solutions. Will they provide these multiple solutions, whether it's vaccine diplomacy, whether it's RSCI, whether it is taking on the challenge on the RRE, or whether it is the confrontation in South China Sea? So there are many questions. So I'm extremely happy that in addition to getting some answers, we also raised many more questions, which are of great relevance to us. I would like to thank all the partners and also the speakers from Australia, from Japan, and from Taiwan, who have given us some extremely useful inputs. And from within our shores, I know all the speakers here, have brought such rich knowledge to the table that, we are very happy as one of the organizers to have accessed this kind of knowledge and information that is of immense use to the policymaker. We definitely would like to make a summary of all that we have heard today. The recordings will be uploaded on YouTube. And, as a policy, all our reports also go to the Ministry of External Affairs. And this will be one report that will definitely be looked at by those people in the corridors of power. Thank you very much. And special thanks to all the people who have come from outside the country. And Jai Hind. Over to you, Nisha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That brings us to the end of one-day international virtual conference. On behalf of the partner organizations, I would like to take this opportunity to express our thanks and appreciation to those who have contributed to making this event possible. At the outset, I would like to place on record our sincere gratitude to Professor Dr. Bhimal Patel, Mr. Pratap Heblikar in the Institute for Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, Mr. Sashi Nair and the Press Institute of India, Mr. Krishan Verma and the Raksha University, and Mr. Nabil Mancheri. Thank you, sirs, for your clear vision, tireless efforts, and guidance, which have been invaluable and has resulted in the success of this conference. We are privileged to have worked with you. It has been our immense honor and privilege this day to listen to some of the leading experts in the field who have brought our attention to the most pressing issues in the global rare earth supply chain. On behalf of all present, I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us across time zones and for sharing from your vast experience. We have certainly garnered tremendous insight from your presentations, and we wish you the very best in all your future endeavors. Such an event would not be possible without the active participation of our audience. I thank all the participants, esteemed guests and dignitaries, veterans, research scholars and interns, young minds of C3S, industry professionals, journalists, and media personnel for their enthusiastic participation, thought-provoking questions, and insightful comments, which have added great value to this event. We look forward to hosting you at other online dialogues and discussions in the future. I extend our warm appreciation and thanks to the members of C3S for their keen and active involvement in all our activities as a think tank. Thank you for unreservedly sharing from your vast experiential knowledge and strategic insights to all the inquisitive minds that interact on the C3S platform. We are truly grateful for all your contributions. I take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks to Commodore R.S. Vasan, Director C3S, for his patient guidance, exemplary leadership, and unwavering support, which furnishes our research and flourishes our work here at C3S. I also thank Mr. Ashwin and Mr. Somrag from Christ University, Bangalore, for their invaluable support at the back end of this meeting room, which has helped ensure the smooth proceeding of the day's programs. And finally, I warmly thank the members of Team C3S, Commodore Vijesh Garg, Mr. Balasubramaniam, and Ms. Padmashri Anandan, for their commitment, creative efforts, and determination, which are clearly evident in the success of this international conference. Thank you all once again, and Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much.